on this computer. Did everybody hear that?
Yep.
Okay.
Indeed.
So say on Big Brother, do not swear, do not show nudity from this point forward. And what we'll do is we'll kick the session off. So I think first and foremost, Tom's volunteered very kindly to be our initial person who's going to share his experiences, mainly because he's fairly new to it, just started to do the chopper build, so it may be relevant to lots of people who kind of at that stage have just put stuff together and it's ready to launch. So, Tom, are you there?
I am here. I'm here.
Jolly good.
Hello.
I will spotlight you if I can find you in my mist of square boxes. If you talk, it makes it a bit easier.
Hello.
That's good.
Good evening. Is that helpful?
That's very helpful. There, I found you. It's found you. Hang on a minute.
There we go. Okay. Let me just adjust the light a bit. That might help. God. No. Anyway. Evening all. Yeah, as Michael said, I'm onto the chopper build at the moment. And I did post a video earlier on today. I had a huge milestone today. I actually managed to get chopper driving for the first time. So I literally, I got
well done, Tom.
Thank you. I got the final component that I needed, which was the wireless receiver. So as soon as that arrived, it was sort of like, right, just, you know, where you sweep the desk clear, that kind of happened, and control system went on and connecting up to the computer and all bits and pieces like that. But a few bits and pieces that I have learned over the last few months is one of the most important things is once you've decided on what system you want to go for, I've gone Padawan 360, and there's a lot of information on the GitHub page relating to that, and links to Steve's videos and bits and pieces like that. The first probably three important things. The first one is to read all the documentation. Second thing is to read it again. And the third thing is to read it a third time. Just read it as much as you can. If you have any questions, there's loads of people in the group who've got the knowledge. Steve, certainly, I know he's done plenty of videos on YouTube, which I'm sure he'll touch on when it gets to him. I've asked questions from other builders who have also built chopper and done similar builds and bits and pieces like that. And I've had so much help, and people have said, "Oh no, don't do this, do this." And it's just been the help is there. Don't be afraid to ask. It is when you're first starting out, it can be overwhelming and weird voodoo magic to how to make these things work, but it's doable. It is doable. So now that I've got that out the way, with regards to chopper and the Padawan 360, Tim Hebel has done an electronics mount for chopper. I do believe there's also one for R2, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
So that is, I'm trying to look through it. That is Tim Hebel's mount that fits in chopper. He also has a bill of materials for this. And although he has gone with the shadow system within his, the only main component that needs changing is the controller and the wireless receiver. This is for the Xbox 360 controller, whereas his receiver matches up with the PlayStation 4 controller, I do believe. And then obviously the coding is different. Beyond that, all the components are the same. So I've got a 6-way fuse box here and here. I'm not necessarily using all 12, but I've got options there in the future, should I so wish to add them later on. I'm going to add a few other bits. I'm going to add some internal lights into the body. I think I've seen John has put internal lights. I think I've seen. It just makes it look so much easier. So I can easily connect that to a fuse box on a simple switch, and away I go.
Personal recommendation on the lights: keep them separate from your system power.
Okie dokie.
Power it off like a USB box so that you can use the lights while you're fiddling with the internals of the system, so that you You don't have to have everything set up. But you can have lights while you're wiring things in the
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So I've got the fuse boxes, and then the main brains is here. That is the Arduino Mega underneath with the USB Shield host on the top. When I bought mine, I noticed that 3 of the jumpers, which are just in here, were unsoldered. But that to tell you what ones you need to solder, Steve has got a video on that, and Steve helped me out to get the right ones to make sure there's power going to all the necessary areas where it goes to. Following on from that, I've then got the siren speed controller. If electronics and getting your astromech moving is something that you're looking at, there's currently at least about a 16-week wait on this particular component.
Tom, just to mention, that's not a siren, that's your saber-tooth.
Saber-tooth, sorry. That's the siren. Sorry, guys. That's the siren, that's the saber-tooth. Sorry. There's about a 16-week wait on the saber-tooth at the moment. So if it's something you are thinking about, I would get that ordered sooner rather than later.
Can I just add something really quick?
Yeah.
With the Ukraine-Russian thing, the United States gets about 90% of its neon for chip manufacturing from the Ukraine. So I imagine that the chip shortage will get much worse very quickly. So if you have the opportunity to place an order for your motors, you haven't, I would suggest doing that ASAP.
Yeah. Sorry, were you going to say something, Steve?
No, all I was saying was about that 16-week lead time, but I'll mention that in a few minutes, mate.
Yep, no worries. Over here, the Siren 10, that does the dome rotation. And then over this side is primarily the sound. So I've got the SparkFun MP3 trigger. It's really weird doing it backwards there. The amplifier, and then underneath the amplifier is a ground loop isolator to reduce any hum that you could potentially get within a system. So that's the main guts of Chopper, but it is also very applicable to R2.
Tom, so
yes,
what you're holding up here is, it looks like when you rip a panel off the Millennium Falcon, you see all these cables behind. It looks brilliant, but it's also quite scary. So when you first grab your first component, what was it like? Like, oh shit, where do I start?
No, it weren't so much, oh shit, where do I start? Luckily, each component fits in its own place on here. So as I was getting bits and pieces, I could just add them in and all that sort of thing. In the GitHub page, it's got information on what pins you need to connect from where to where, and bits and pieces like that. I myself, just for my own peace of mind and just so as I can trace it and follow it, I have done a PDF wiring diagram of this setup with the components laid out as I've got them laid out on this board, with the various colored wires that I've used for mine, going from this pin to this pin, and you can follow it and you can trace it. That's a PDF that I have shared with Michael to go onto the page, wherever the best place that is be, whether it's in Chopper, whether it's in a shared folder for electrics. I'll let Michael decide where that one goes. The other thing that I struggled with the Arduino README page was it didn't necessarily flow full on for the electrics. There was a little bit here, then a bit further down, you had another bit, and a bit further down. So the other thing that I've done is I've done a full list of pin to pin, how I've got mine set up. And luckily, when I plugged it in and tested it for the first time today, everything worked as it should do. So I've now tested my pin to pin listings. The only thing I haven't tested to this point is the Maestros. I've not connected it up to the 2 Maestros. But my main target was to actually get him driving around today. So there's also a pin to pin, which specifically lists the pin, the unit or the component, what pin it's going from, what pin it's going to, and then other little bits of information as I've come across it, sort of like some recommendations for sort of like wire gauge, fuses, where to put switches, and bits and pieces like that. So hopefully that'll help. That'll help some other people. I've done it. It's almost like a checklist. So when I've gone back and find how I've got it all wired up, I can say, I can actually, on a sheet, I can tick, okay, this one goes from TX number 1, and then you can follow it. The Sabertooth is TX number 1, if I remember rightly offhand. I haven't got the list in front of me. And then flashing the code to the Arduino was simple. Prior to doing that, I made sure that my receiver would connect, because I wasn't 100% sure if the receiver would connect. But that was simple. Just load the specific Xbox receiver code, open up the serial monitor within Arduino, and I could actually see all my button presses as I was doing it. So before I then loaded the main code, I knew in my own head, yep, the receiver's connecting, brilliant. So when it comes, I knew I'd taken the controller element out of it. But luckily, when it should have been driving, it drove. The only problem I had that when I'd done it, when I went forward, he turned on the spot. When I went left, he drove forward. And that was just simply a matter of swapping over the
turbo wires.
Yeah.
Wires. It was just, when I wired it up, I just wired it, knowing full well that if I got it right, happy days. If not, it is a simple case of unplugging 2 wires, swapping them over, and plugging them back in again. On that, so yeah, it was.
Question: when you take all your basic boards and stuff, how are you mounting them to the backing board? Do you screw them? Do you Velcro them? I mean, how are you doing?
I've used screws in Tim's design for his electronics mount. He's got little posts with holes in that marry up with all the components. So it is literally simply a case of that component fits there, however many screw holes are in that component, a couple of screws, job done.
Okay.
So the only downside with that was I had to source the specific items, or it was mainly the specific amplifier that Tim Hebel had used.
Yep. In the US, it's
that was the only one. Everything else, yeah, I think mine come from the Netherlands. I can share the link to where it come from. Sound Imports, I think it was called, the company.
Yeah, it's a Shure amplifier, I believe.
Yeah.
But US, you can get it from a site called Parts Express, or I think it's Parts Express.
The other thing that I would recommend is a USB extension, USB to USB. Scott's shaking his head. This silly little Arduino code, this short little Arduino cable is really short, and because the Maestros take a different USB to that one, rather than get lots of long USB cables, I got a USB extension, which means I can leave the electron if I just want to tweak some of the speeds, some of the ramps and things like that. I've not got to take the whole board out to sit it on the bench to connect it to the computer. I've got a 3-meter extension lead that means Chopper can sit next to the table, and I can just plug him straight in to reflash the code should I need to.
My Maestros still have that code, that cable on them, and they're going to live there in Robbie. They don't take up a lot of space. They just stay there, and when I need to change it, plug the extension.
Yeah, plug the extension in. So in your list of things that you want to buy, a USB extension cable is a I would say that's a bit of a life hack, that one. That makes life so much easier.
And when you're laying out a
problem on my extension, I got it picked up a USB 3 for some reason, and it didn't want to work with the Maestro cables. I don't know why. that might be an issue. That again, liberal arts, not I don't speak engineering, so I don't know the details of USB 2 versus 3, but apparently it made a difference.
Yeah, well, I have got a 5 meter. I think it's a mini USB, whichever one the Maestros take. I've got a 5 meter one, so I plugged it in, couldn't get anything, and then I realised that the one that I got was purely to do power transfer, and it's not data line in it.
Mm.
So, unfortunately, initially I was sort of like I was kind of balancing Chopper's Dome next to my laptop just to try and get something while I was testing. But yeah, USB extension.
Yeah, you really want your computer to
so
not be. You don't want your computer tethered to anything you're working on that's really short. In fact, on the other table over here is whatever the boards you're working on. Computer's over here on the desk. That's a much more convenient way to do things.
Yeah.
And less risky.
But yeah, going back to what Michael was saying, this does look daunting. It really does look daunting. But as I say, I followed the wiring diagram that I'd done, and then once I didn't do one component at a time. I did one set of cables at a time. So the first thing I did was I run all my positive 12 volt cables and got all them connected. I then run all my ground cables and got them connected, all the big ones. Once all the big cables were out of the way, I could then start running the smaller gauge data cables and the lower voltage. I'm running a 12 volt system on Chopper. The Arduino takes 5 volts, and that is taken directly from the 5 volt output on the Sabertooth. And then the SparkFun over here, he's also 5 volts, and I'm using the Siren 10 5 volt output, and then obviously ground return to then power him at the lower voltage. And then beyond that, it's I've got my yellow data cables running to where they need to go.
I think it's a really important point that most of the speed controllers, i.e. the Sabertooth and the Siren, come with their own 5 volt output. So when you're looking at powering logic, because initially I kind of went, I need to get a separate power supply or whatever to power it. But actually you can power logic quite happily, can't you, with the output of those devices? And virtually all speed controllers do that 5 volt output. Yeah,
and it'd be the same situation if you decide to run a 24 volt system. The Sabertooth, I think, don't quote me on this. There's other people who know better than me. I think the Sabertooth takes up to 30 volts on that, but it will still put out it'll still put the 5 volt output on that set of connectors at the top where you've got your serial data input as well.
Just so make sure that your 0 volt line, if you're going to use that 5 volt coming out of there, is what is used for the negative, and that it does not tie back in any way to the ground of the rest of the system. Because if you create a ground loop by tying the 0 volt coming off of that board, the Sabertooth or any other board, to the ground of the system, while theoretically it should be the same, a very small differential in that voltage will cause chips to pop off the board and things to burst into flame.
Yeah.
Ask him how he knows.
Yeah.
So,
speaking from experience, Rick.
I would actually recommend not powering the Arduino off of that 5 volt out. The Arduino can take more. The Arduino recommended is actually 7 to 12, I think.
Yeah.
Things can get hairy if you're supplying it just 5 volts. You might get brownouts.
Yeah, another place. I'm going to jump in on that if you don't mind.
Well, before you jump in, Steve, I think we're probably going to move to Steve anyway. From Thomas, and hopefully we'll kind of build a little bit of a picture and experience on that. But massive thanks to Thomas in sharing that in the first instance.
That's all right to say. If anyone's got any questions, please feel free to message me. As I say, literally, it was only about 3 hours ago that I got chopper driving around. So it's it's that recent for me on this particular project. Also, as I say, I've shared a couple bits I've generated a couple of PDFs that I've shared with Michael to go on the group page. So please feel free, have a look. Any questions, let me know.
That's brilliant. We'll get all them shared and also share this video with that. So you are a superstar, Tom. Thank you.
No worries.
We'll probably shift over to Steve now, actually, because I think Steve is done lots and lots of videos on the Padawan 360. And he hasn't blown as many boards up as Rick, but I'm sure his experience is equal. So, Steve.
There's still time, Steve.
There is still time.
There's always time to open it up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Spotlight you. There you go. So you are spotlighted.
Ooh.
Woohoo. You lucky man.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, so I think the first thing I want to say is that don't think that Padawan 360 is the be all and end all and by any means the best system in the world. I come from an RC background. I've been a professional in the world of RC, a professional drone pilot. So I'm very comfortable and familiar with RC. And yet I personally chose to go with Padawan on my build. This is kind of aimed really at the people who don't really know an awful lot about the direction they want to go. Should we say novices, for want of a better sort of choice of phrase. So Padawan, the beauty of Padawan is it's an extremely ergonomic system, but it's not the only system. As I say, it has got its pluses and it's got its pros and it's got its cons. Radio control, which we're going to come on to a bit later on, again, phenomenal and is required for TV and film work. And shadow, obviously, is another one as well. We're going to talk about that in a little while. But yeah, so I kind of got into droid building before Michael's group even really existed. I think before even 3D printing of a droid really sort of came with any sort of long-term support, shall we say. So when I was looking for a control system for my wood and metal droid that I was building, I did quite a lot of research, and one thing I will mention, which we haven't really touched on so far, is the support available in the Astromech forums. So you've got astromech.net, which is our main sort of US-centric but worldwide Astromech forum, and there's also astromech.info, which caters sort of more specifically for people in the UK and should we say Europe, I guess. So yeah, Padawan, I just found that the ability to control sounds and the movement of the droid, all from one very commonly found and cheaply available radio control hand unit that you can fit inside the pocket of a hoodie, for example, to hide it, it just seemed too good to be true almost. So I was skeptical at first. I'm absolutely totally skeptical, as I say, coming from an RC background. But I grew to love the way that it was written in so far as the code is concerned by Dan. If you don't know who Dan is, Dan Krause is the guy who wrote the Padawan 360 sketch. It is based very heavily on the Shadow sketch. The two share the majority, actually, a substantial amount of the code. But the 360 came along at the time mostly because the actual controller that was required for Shadow was a PS2 controller, and they were getting scarcer and scarcer, and they were starting to, even the ones that were there. Sorry, isn't 360 more so based on the original Padawan? No, I think Shadow was. I think it was Shadow, and then Padawan actually came from Shadow. But I may well be wrong on that, John.
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. I was just
I'm pretty sure if you actually look in the sketch, it actually says this is heavily based on Shadow. But as I say, I may well have got that the wrong way around. Anyway, beside the point. So don't for a moment think that Padawan 360 is the only solution out there. I strongly urge any new builders getting into this to have a look and to balance the pros and cons of the other systems that are available. As I say, if you're interested in perhaps going into film or TV work with your droid, then you have to go traditional remote control. That is a requirement from Lucas Disney. Tom has spoken quite a lot about the sort of technical side of Padawan, and he's done a great job of that. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. I felt at the time when I was building my droid that there wasn't really that much support. So that's one of the reasons why I put a series of videos together. Now, going back and looking at my first video that I put out, I actually have changed the way I build systems now, mostly around the way that you power the Arduino and the MP3 trigger. As we sort of started touching on just towards the end of Tom's little chat there, what I do on my own builds is I do utilize the 5-volt out, and I power the Arduino directly through the 5-volt pins on the Arduino. I totally agree with what John's saying about the voltages required for an Arduino, but that's if you're using the barrel plug or the V-in. If you do that, one of the issues I've come across and personally experienced, and it's the reason why I use the 5-volt instead of using a mains line, if you like, is that you're having to use the voltage regulator on board of the Arduino to power the USB shield and also power the puck. All of that is meaning that the onboard voltage regulator is having to do work. Now, I've come across situations where I've had brownouts. When I first built my first system and I powered it through 12 volts, I had brownouts. And I actually lost control of my droid for a brief time at one point. And fortunately, Padawan's written in such a way that it fails safe. So it just meant that I lost control on the sticks just for a split second or two and then regained control. So I tend to use the 5-volt. Now, if you put 5 volts into the 5-volt the 5-volt pin, I will caveat that by saying, it means that the whole system is running at that 5 volts and it's not having to do any voltage regulation itself. Basically, though, that 5-volt pin is a short around the rest of the Arduino. Anything to do with 5 volts on that Arduino, the head of the ISP pins, or the what the shield uses for USB, it's running at that same 5 volts. So I'm a fan of doing that, but as I say, it is not the only way to do it. You absolutely can use the onboard voltage regulator. Another reason why I do that is it gives you flexibility. It gives you the flexibility to run your droid at whatever voltage you want, up to 30 volts. Although I would again just say I would max that out at 24, more for the sake of the siren. Now the siren will run, I think, up to 30 volts. But I'm sure when I first sort of started getting involved in this, the recommended highest voltage was 24. So that's why when I sort of build systems, I always make sure that you can put any voltage from between 12 and 24. So an 18-volt drill battery, a 20-volt drill battery will work absolutely fine. Even the little voltage readouts that I put on my board. I've got one just down here, actually. Let me grab that. So I also tend to put a, probably going to mess up. I'll turn my virtual background off. 1 second. Put that off. There we go. So I always put a voltage readout on my boards as well, so you can actually see what your main battery voltage is. And as you can possibly see on here, it actually makes for a fairly simple wiring loadout. This is just made on a chopping board. I spin that around the back. Again, it's reasonably neat. So you can see my mains power comes in on this 100 amp kill switch, and that basically puts my power then into these things. Now, if you don't know what these things are called, these are called Wago connectors, W-A-G-O. They are meant for or used by installations in sort of mains house voltage. So you can actually run a surprising amount of current through these things. These I think are rated to
40 amp, 32 amp, something like
that. I think they're rated to 32, but I've seen them tested to 120 amps before they've actually melted. So they have got quite an amount of leeway until they've gone full Rick. So basically, yeah, on this, you've got your sort of main in out, and as I say, the beauty of putting a board together, utilizing the outputs from both the Siren 10 and the Spark one for your voltage is that you can get away with quite a neat little sort of installation, and it doesn't actually matter then what voltage you put in. Okay, next thing I want to mention is fuses. Now, fuses are great, but the purpose in life of a fuse is actually to protect wiring rather than protect components. And if you go onto Dimension's website, you'll find that. Yes.
There was a question. So, did you suggest not using the bin socket? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Personally, I don't use the VIN socket because you're forcing the Arduino to use its onboard voltage regulator to drop that down to 5 volts, which is required by the Shield and which is required by the USB Microsoft or whichever puck that you have.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I did miss the question. If there is questions, obviously feel free to stop me.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat and just finger them in as they come in.
Yeah. I'll
sorry.
Sorry. The internal regulators on almost all the Arduino boards, from what I've seen looking them up, if you could get a half an amp at 5 volts after powering up the Arduino out of them, that would be a good day. But what happens is people always add all these peripherals, LEDs or other boards or sensors that need it, and they start drawing it down. And yeah, once that happens, you'll overheat the regulator and it'll shut down, or you'll get brownouts. That's common.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Stephen. And as I say, personally, it's just my choice. You don't have to do it that way at all. There's many ways to skin this proverbial cat. The other common way of doing it, of course, is to use a dedicated 5 volt regulator to power your logic around. By all means, again, go ahead and do that. I personally had some bad experiences with those, not with R2 building, but with some audio-based props that I build for the escape room market. It starts introducing buzz and hum and, weird, just, little things that are difficult to get hold of. Maybe I'm using cheap regulators, I don't know, but you can certainly get hold of much higher amperage 5 volt regulators for a very, very cheap price, which are probably more solid and reliable. So, again, it's one of those things that there's multiple ways of doing it. I've just got my particular way that I like doing it, and I recommend to people because I think it's a neater way of doing it and ultimately requires less components. So you've got, if you've got less components, you've got less things to troubleshoot when things go wrong.
I got some, I've used in a lot of things, switching power supplies that are designed for being powered by 12 volts DC out of an automobile. They're made, I bought them from a company called Logic Supply originally, but these are just as powerful as a pretty good size, like 140 watt power supply you'd have in a PC, and they'll provide you with 12 volts, 3.3 volts, and 5 volts. Those are pretty handy too. And they are also designed so that if you crank an engine over and the voltage drops, they can pull the voltage back up to maintain their output during extreme loads. That's another solution that I found over the years that solved a lot of weird problems with the brownouts, especially if you're drawing like your drive motor power off of the same battery set. Because
again, I would just say be mindful of your main voltage, or your effectively what's going to be your motor voltage, because if you try to run a 12 volt a regulator that's designed for 12 volts and you chuck 24 volts into it, you're probably going to let the magic smoke out.
These regulators that I was using have a range of about 12 to 24 input, and they don't seem to mind if it drifts dramatically. Actually, they'll drift below 12 volts and still maintain their output because they have a boost circuit built into them. Pretty cool little devices, but yeah, they cost about $50 or something like that.
Okay. Thomas, you had a question about connectors.
Yeah. Just while you're talking about sort of like connecting to the Arduino and bits and pieces like that. At the moment, I'm using Dupont connectors. The pin side of the Dupont connectors.
Yeah.
What I've found when I connect onto my Arduino and Shield, they seem rather loose.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a trick you can do for that.
Hot glue. I thought putting a blob of hot glue just to hold the connector in was one thing I thought, but
yeah. So what I do, don't know if this one is, you probably won't. No, I won't show you that one. You won't be able to see it. There's two things I do. Oftentimes I'll just get a pair of snipe nose pliers, pointy nose pliers, and just put a tiniest little kink on the end of the actual Dupont side pin. And what that does is it makes sure that when it kind of goes in, it's not like loose, if you see what I mean. It's actually kind of almost grips as it goes down into the female side of it. And then, yes, absolutely, I do put a blob of hot glue. My first major event with my R2, which was actually on public roads at a parade, got about halfway around the circuit and he just ground to a halt. So I had to rather embarrassingly take his dome off and stick my head inside trying to figure out what on earth had gone wrong. And it was just so rattly on that road that it had literally vibrated one of the pins out, and it happened to be the data pin for the Sabertooth. So quickly powered it off, noticed that's what it was, plugged it back in, powered it all back up, and fortunately everything was fine. Made it around the rest of the event, and ever since then I put a dab of hot glue on things just to make sure that things don't come loose.
Yeah, so just when I did it, I noticed, I'm not. That's through the whole build of the electrics. That's the only thing that was the only major concern that I sort of had. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Another thing you can do real quick, Steve, is like put if you're only using one or two pins on that with a connector, load it up with the blanks in there. So load up 5 or 6, use a 6-pin connector and put just blanks in there, and then that way it'll help hold those in position.
And that is I don't know. That is 100% what I do. It's not going to show very well, but you can possibly just see that one there popping in and out of focus. On there, you can see I'm actually using three of the actual pins, but I've got 6 actual connectors on there just to make sure it's doubly gripped, if you see what I mean. So yes, exactly that. That's a good practice. Talking about Dupont connectors, if you don't know what a Dupont connector is, I strongly recommend you go and order yourself a crimp set. They are life-changing. They just make life so much easier when creating your own sort of cable runs. If you are tempted to use the sets of sort of jumper leads that you get with like Arduino starter kits and things like that, and breadboard starter kits, sack that idea off straight away. They are terrible, and they are made of the thinnest of thin gauge wire.
Terrible wire.
Connections are absolutely appalling. And you will have a world of pain trying to troubleshoot your problems because everything looks like it's plugged in right. And even if you sort of buzz it out with a meter, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. So I strongly recommend you invest in a set of Dupont a crimp tool. I haven't got mine's off site at the moment, but I use it all the time, literally all day, every day. There you are, Michael's got one. You can pick them up for about $8 on AliExpress. They're not expensive. Buy yourself a kit, a Dupont connector kit, and you'll wonder why on earth you never did it earlier. Excuse me.
Sorry, Steve. The other thing that I've used is little ferrule connectors.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, they're not connectors. Instead of on things like the Sabertooth and the Siren connectors, where you put a wire into a screw terminal, it's a little metal cap that fits over the bare ends of the metal and is crimped on, and it gives you a very, very solid connection. And if you rewire it and take wires out and put them back in, your wire doesn't get messed up. Again, it just helps keeps things neat and tidy.
The board shields that also allow you to plug a board onto all the pins on an Arduino that have I call them Euro connectors, the green connectors that you screw down. You can stick all your wires into the side and screw them down, and that'll keep your wires from falling out very well. You worked on escape rooms. I use those in all my escape room assemblies because I had the same problem. The damn wires fall out because people beat on the machine or whatever, and they vibrate out. So or wing shields or whatever they call them nowadays, wire shields. Those are great too because they provide a long pin that plugs into all the pins of the Arduino. So it's very well connected to the Arduino board, but it also provides you a screw terminal for every output pin or input pin you would be using. Those work good too. They save a lot of headaches.
Yeah, for sure.
Steve,
okay,
I put a link into the chat for one of the crimpers that comes with a bunch of different connector types, and especially Dupont, so that people can make up their own. So I dropped it into the chat.
Thank you very much indeed for doing that, Rick. That's awesome. Okay, so what next to talk about? Let's talk about range and fail-safe, very, very important things. The range on the Padawan system is pretty damn good. Now, there is a common misconception that Padawan the Padawan 360 specifically uses Bluetooth. It does not use Bluetooth. It uses a proprietary 2.4 gigahertz radio signal developed by Microsoft. It is not Bluetooth, okay? So don't, if someone says to you, oh, you know, I'm not going to use one of those because it uses Bluetooth, they are incorrect. So it has actually got a surprisingly good range, and it is also surprisingly good in noisy radio environments. And by that, I mean, if you go to a con and you've got, you know, thousands of people there with their mobile phones and things, and they're all Bluetooth with their headsets or earphones or whatever else, it's surprisingly good at cutting through that. So again, I'll hark back to what I said earlier. If you are doing anything that's potentially going to be film or TV work, you're going to be expected to have radio control. That does mean that typically doing sound control before the Kyber system came along was tricky. Kyber solves an awful lot of those issues and is a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal piece of kit. I'm very, very impressed with it. So if you need a bit more sort of help, if you're starting out, the first place I would say to go is to Dan Krause's GitHub page, and he hosts the sketches on there. There are a couple of things you do have to look out for, though. The dome board rate in his default sketch is set to 2400 baud. Now, if you follow any of my videos, hopefully you will have heard me say that you need to change that to 9600 to work with the dip switch setups that we kind of go for. It's all to do with what's called packetized serial, but I won't bore you with the details of that. So do make sure that you alter, if you're downloading the default sketch from Dan's GitHub page, alter the dome board rate to 9600. You'll find it just literally says dome board rate, all in one long word. Just search that in the sketch, change the value to 9600, and you should be good to go. The other thing is, a lot of people ask me, why would you use a Uno instead of a Mega or the other way around? The choice really is yours. If you're going to have a droid that's a fairly basic droid in terms of what it's going to do and animation and stuff like that, Uno is more than capable and more than good enough. You can do your drive, you can do your dome, you can do your sounds. Also, just to mention, Padawan is not a light system. It does not control or doesn't actually sort of run your lighting in your droid. If you're going to do something, if you want lighting in your droid, then you're looking at something like PCs or some of the other lighting systems that are available. But we're really, when we're talking about Padawan 360, we're talking about drive and dome and sounds. So if you're wanting to sort of have panels opening and things, then the route that most people seem to have taken is to go with what's called a Maestro board made by a company called Polulu. Probably pronounced that all sorts of wrong, but Michael has done a number of sessions and recorded videos which are up on his YouTube channel to do with adding Maestro and how you then introduce the actual Maestro parts of the code into the existing Padawan sketch. The thing you have to be really careful of, and I'm sort of aiming this towards Arduino novices, is something called a delay. Someone sounded like they're underwater. So the way that Arduino code works, it's a very, very basic language. It basically starts at the top, gets to a bit called loop, and it then just loops ad infinitum around that particular loop until you turn the thing off, basically, or you tell it to stop as one of your actions. But it will execute that loop as fast as it possibly can, which is what you want for control, because at all times, whenever you're moving the sticks, you want your code to have realized that you've moved that stick in the shortest fraction possible of time, so that it does exactly what you're expecting it to do. One way you can break that very easily is by writing a line in there that says delay brackets 500 brackets and semicolon at the end. That will instantly mean that every half a second, your loop of code will stop running whilst it just sits there and waits for that 500 milliseconds to count down. It's a very, very dangerous thing to do. So please do not ever write the word delay into your Arduino loop in particular. There are ways of getting around it, but typically what I would say is if you want to do animation of panels opening and all that sort of good stuff, then break that out to a different system. I've personally done one where I break out to another Arduino, and the Arduino has actually done all the servo control. The Maestro is a arguably better way of doing it, because basically everything is on one small board, and actually programming your animation is an absolute breeze with the Pololo Maestro software that you can freely download. Very, very worthwhile piece of kit. I've been waffling for ages. Is there any questions you would like me to take?
On the Xbox 360 controller, you mentioned you get more range. You get more than the normal Bluetooth, whatever, 10 meters of range, 33
Oh,
feet.
yeah, you totally get more than 10 meters, yeah.
Okay. I'll speak to that
I've had my
on Shadow.
Sorry, say that again?
I'll speak to that when we touch on Shadow. Normal Bluetooth,
I've had my Droid further away from me than I felt comfortable without being able to run up to it and stop someone taking its head off, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I don't want to run that far. I'm old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I wouldn't have my Droid any further out of sight than I feel comfortable with regards to control and range, shall we say.
The question from Robert around is there interrupts on the Arduino?
Interrupts. It is possible to interrupt an Arduino. I don't think these. Yeah, it depends. The Mega has got more than the Uno, I believe. I wouldn't want to start messing around with the base code. Basically, I've had loads of people say to me, "Oh, can you add this to the Padawan code? Can you add that to the Padawan code?" And I've always answered, it's possible, but I will never publish a change like that for fear of things breaking and other people downloading Dan. So I've absolutely kept my hands off Dan's code, with the exception of telling people to change the code to the dome baud rates to 9600 other than 2400. I've really not touched Dan's code. I've made suggestions to Dan, and he has actually taken those suggestions on board. So if you download the code now, you'll find in there's a line that says is left-hand drive, and you can change that value to it from a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0, and that will dictate whether your controls are on the left thumbstick for drive or on the right thumbstick for drive, because originally it was on the right thumbstick, and I rewrote the code to be on left thumbstick because I'm come from a gaming background, and for moving my character around in a shooter, for example, I'm always moving with the left stick, and I'm looking, which is like the equivalent of turning the dome with the right stick. So I asked Dan to put a change into the code, which he did, and he then put that out again as the core code. So I would please ask people to respect that. I'm not taking any credit at all. I mean, people have taken hopefully a lot of guidance from my video series that I put out, and I absolutely 100% am very grateful to people for their feedback and good wishes on that, and I'm very happy to continue to do so. But please do always make sure that Dan is credited appropriately for writing the code in the first place.
Hey, Steve,
I have just one note to interrupt. There is like 6, I think, interrupts on Mega, but to everyone who want to start messing with them, always check documentation first, then all the libraries which you are going to use, because there is no way how to detect that some interrupt is not already used by, I don't know, USB library, for example, or some timer in the system.
So
servo library,
you will just interrupt, and you will feel like, okay, everything will works now, and then you will start getting issues when something get over. And of course, you have to be always really fast in interrupt, which is like basic rule, because when you are in interrupt, everything is stopped. So you can easily get into situation that you feel like, okay, I'm okay, everything works. And now, for example, your controller will start lagging because you will stop the USB communicated with controller, and then God knows what will happen. So interrupt is really, really danger stuff. So be aware of this.
Yeah, I've always been late, and I'll just add another Arduino and just talk to it with serial data, and it's like, maybe not the optimum parts way to do things, but it's easier on my brain and less weird stuff could happen.
Yeah, I've driven servos for someone using a secondary Uno. Yeah, an Uno's like $5 or whatever. It was so cheap that I did it that way originally before I actually even knew about the Pololu Maestro. It was Michael that put me onto the Maestro boards. So yeah, there's multiple ways of doing it, but as I've tried to get across is, please don't hack around Dan's code too much, and certainly if you do hack it around, please don't then go start sharing it to various people, because we, the community, can't support it. You know, if someone says, oh, I've got a Padawan 360 and every now and then it just turns to the right without me touching the sticks, we're going to make assumptions that that's based on the original code. And if it's not, then the community is just going to go, sorry, we're not going to help you with that because it's not the standard. So do please always try to come back if you're going down the Padawan route. Do please not do too many changes unless you are totally prepared to support those yourself and you know, deal with any consequences.
Steve, question for you with regards to the future proof of the Padawan system. So I guess part one is, can you use an Xbox One controller versus a 360 controller? And what does the future of that system look like as Microsoft progresses?
Great question.
Okay, so yeah, it is a great question. So the short answer is Padawan 360 only works with 360 controllers, both the receiver and the transmitter. The reason for that is the libraries that it uses in the background. So if you sort of ever delve into the actual Padawan code itself, you'll see that there is some very straightforward language in there that sort of says if the Xbox button left L1 is pushed down at the same time as the A button, then do whatever this action is. So, and it's the library that makes life simpler in the main sketch to be able to do that. For the Xbox One controllers and whatever else may sort of come in the future, I think it would basically require a rewrite of the code. And this is pretty much why Padawan 360 came about. If you go right back to where I started this chat, it used to be based on PS2 controllers, and they were starting to get hard to come by. So I dare say, you know, who knows, a couple of years down the line, maybe the 360 controllers are now starting to get to that point where they're difficult to get hold of. I know the receivers are getting harder to get hold of, genuine Microsoft ones. There are pattern ones out there. Some work, some don't, without changes to the library, to the Xbox Directory library. So again, you sort of pays your money and takes your choice a little bit. But I have seen a couple of threads. I'm not as up on it as I should be as to what the future is for Padawan, and if it becomes Padawan 1 for the Xbox One controller, for example. I honestly don't know. But I'm not Xbox. I'm PlayStation myself. Can anyone tell me if I had an inkling that the Xbox One controller went back to Bluetooth? Does anyone know the answer?
It supports Bluetooth, but it has a proprietary protocol too.
It's quite proprietary. I've not seen any libraries on the Arduinos that support the Xbox One. The actual code, as you said, Steve, on the Padawan is fairly simple in that, you know, once you can take an input from something, then you can drive anything. The challenge with the Xbox One is getting that input because of the proprietary protocol, and that's the bit that I haven't seen any libraries that can read the Xbox.
Yeah, once someone writes a library, it will be relatively straightforward to then port that into a variant of the Padawan system, Padawan 1 or whatever it may end up being called in the future.
Awesome.
By the way, even wired controllers are different. New Xbox Series XS is not able to use wired controller for Xbox 360.
They moved the wires.
And it's USB. It's just and you can connect there some Xbox Series SX third-party wired controller. It's not that this device is not able to use wired controller. It's not. It can use some of them, even third parties, but not original Microsoft wired X360. So I think that the difference could be maybe even bigger than we think.
Engineers like to change things. That's why technicians often hate them.
Yeah, agree. Is there any other questions I can deal with at the moment? There's one or two other things I do want to touch on, but let's just see if there's any other questions I can take at the moment. Silence, great. So the other thing I want to mention is connectors. Now, this is another question I get quite often, is what sort of connectors should I use? What kind of connectors do I use? I'm a fan personally of the XT type of connectors, XT90s and XT60s. Again, coming from an RC background, these are very, very common connectors. And in fact, I think was it Tom you were asking me today about those, or someone else? Someone asked me, I can't remember.
I did. These on mine as standard. I've used them on quite a few things. So it just, they take the ampage. They can take the power going through them, and it's just, I have them on hand. So.
Yeah. So what I do on my own personal Droid is the main battery wiring harness goes to an XT90 connector before it even goes to the switch. So I can actually remove that and then plug in my charger to charge the batteries straight through the XT, through another XT90 connector. And I use XT60 connectors off the Sabertooth 2x32 to the motor wires. So I have a short, a short 3 or 4 inches of wire that go to an XT60. The reason for doing that is if you push your Droid, if it's got DC motors like our Droids typically do, if you push that, it's acting effectively as a generator. So it actually tries to push current back through into your electronics. Now, the Sabertooth is quite a clever piece of kit, and it should cope with that no problem at all. What it will try to do is actually act as a regenerative, is that the right word? Power unit, and it will actually try to push voltage back down into wherever it thinks it got its main sort of voltage from, which is all fine and dandy if you're using a battery and the battery happens to be switched on. Effectively, you just start charging your battery. But what it can do is actually then start giving you some undesirable results with it sort of trying to power on and stuff like that. But what I do is I just unplug my XT60 connectors that go to my motors, and that way the drive system is effectively disconnected from the speed controller anyway. So it's got no chance of actually doing anything nasty like pushing voltage back down the line. Just to make sure we say. Yes, there was a question that came up about the shortage of motor controllers. So Dimension Engineering, I order quite a lot of stuff from them fairly regularly, and I put an order in for some Siren 10s, which arrived without too much hassle. And I also put an order in for some Sabertooth 2x32s in October, I think it was. And at the time, they said it's a 16-week lead time. If you look today, it still says it's a 16-week lead time. So basically, ignore the fact that it says 16 weeks. That is just a made-up number. That's probably the maximum they can put on their website. Right now, this global chip shortage is causing all sorts of problems. And also, I have seen some people charging a ridiculous amount of money for them on other sites, and also the 2x25 version. The 2x25 should cost the same as a 32. They are actually priced the same on Dimension's website, which is about $125. Works out about 90 odd pounds, I think, something like that, 90 to 100 pounds. So I've seen people charging $180 for them, which I think is just ridiculous and profiteering. So yeah, if you're building a system at the moment and it's going to be using DC motors and you're going to be using Sabertooth, regardless of whether it's radio control or Padawan or Shadow, whichever system, then unfortunately you're probably just going to have to wait. Or if you can even find someone selling them, then you're probably going to be paying a massive premium, sadly, at the moment. So yeah, it's just a bit rubbish, really, but there's not an awful lot we can do about it. As I say, I've been waiting about 6 months for what should have been what was classed as a 16-week lead time, but it still says 16 weeks today.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Fantastic. Right.
Can I just before I wrap up, if anyone does want to look at my Padawan 360 videos, then just go onto YouTube, search for Padawan 360. There's a playlist on there, or search for Imperial Light and Magic, which is my actual YouTube channel. Also in there, I have got some videos about how to use your SparkFun MP3 soundboard with regards to writing files, because that's another thing that can commonly catch people out with it playing what they think is the wrong sound at the wrong time. So all of that is explained in another video. Have a look at my playlist, all about Padawan 360 and SparkFun MP3.
Thank you for providing the YouTube information.
No,
you're welcome. You're welcome. I really just started it because it wasn't out there when I first started. And as I say, I started doing this stuff before 3D printed droids really came along. So I just
24 years ago for me.
Duty down to just to try and help. This community has given so much to me, and I mean that with absolute all sincerity. Especially since these Droids and Drinks chats, it's kept me sane throughout the last couple of years. So
absolutely.
Just also to say, I am so looking forward to meeting up with people at Celebration. We're going to have a whale of a time.
Oh God, yes. God, yes.
Nice.
Brilliant.
Nice.
That's a good statement to finish on that, Steve. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Right, we will continue, and I make no apologies for the fact that we're just going to carry on with control systems, because I think it's useful to have lots and lots of views. So we're going to move over to John now, and as I said, John, I think, printed one of the first bunch of droids, and he's been my go-to person when people have gone, printed droids don't really last for any length of time, and John seems to run these damn things for about 7 or 8 years over various trains, and they continue to work. So, John, do you want to share your secrets around control systems?
Yes. And I actually just looked at the math. I have, with a 2-year gap because of COVID, I'm at 42 events with a full-size droid.
Wow.
18 with a version 2, 21 with a version 3, using the same version 2 legs. The difference being that I switched from the belt drives, which no one should use. Sorry, Michael.
No, you're right.
You admit as much as well. I switched to chain drives before the Mark III existed. I'm going to be reprinting and switching to the direct gear drive soon. And cheap has been There you go. Cheap has been to 3 events now.
On a gear drive, what do you use for grease?
White lithium.
Okay.
I know it gets everywhere, but that's kind of the point.
The blood of droid builders.
It is. I mean, I literally have blood in all of my builds. Yes, I have blood in all of my builds. Like my actual blood.
Mine too. Yeah.
Well, if you'll excuse the expression, this is the way.
It is the way.
It is indeed.
So, I started out with Padawan 360 because that was the thing. I had the controller sitting around. And so the part of why I've done so many events is because I'm active in the 501st. I started with the 501st first. And there's been multiple times when I've been kitted up in my TIE Pilot and driving my droid as well. Even not being in kit though, I had too many situations where kids would see the Xbox controller and want to grab the Xbox controller.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt, even just like I would never say yes, because it was like, you're too small and it's a 60-pound droid, and it's just a whole thing. But just so that I don't even have to be the bad guy to say no, I came across Shadow, small handheld Android droid operating wand.
Oh.
Yes. I normally use one of these, but you can use two to replicate all the functions of a Padawan system. I have a wrist strap, but this, it goes in my hand and just vanishes. No one knows. And especially like if I'm wearing black gloves or something, that way, Padawan was great in hoodie weather. I get hot. I'm not a small dude, working on that, but not a small dude. I get hot, and a lot of events just like convention halls get hot and sweaty, and I'm sitting there like wearing a 501st shirt and stuff. There's no pockets to hide a controller.
Is that a Bluetooth device?
It is a Bluetooth device, which I'll get to.
Okay.
Conveniently enough, I'm reworking C2/BT1's board there, but it is so much like Steve set up cutting board. I switched to cutting boards a little while ago. I just prefer them. They're easy and they fit perfectly in the Mark III. I'm using Tim Hebel's board set up in cheap because it works perfectly, and Tim and I use the same exact components. Like I didn't have to seek out the amp he was using. I looked at it and I was like, oh, we use literally the same amp. We use the same fuse boxes too. But so all the same components as a basic Padawan system, not counting the fuses. The one difference is Bluetooth, and this is a Bluetooth. I can't remember the exact specs on it, but it's a long range Bluetooth receiver. So I have done events at the same convention hall, which is quite long. Both control systems get me all the way to the end of the hall without losing connection. And much to Steve's point, the Droid can go further than I would ever be comfortable doing it. Like I've done it in an empty hall, and I was still like, oh, I'm not comfortable with you being that far away from me.
Yeah, 10 or 20 feet is probably about as far as you'd ever want to get away from.
Yeah, even with the printed droids.
Yeah.
And with this being this small, I've had multiple conversations with people right next to me and the droid kind of interacting with them or interacting with other people. And they're like talking to me, they're looking around, I'm like, who's controlling that droid?
How does it do that?
I love stuff like that. So it's kind of the suspension of disbelief. But then I like being able to show somebody like, look, PlayStation controller. Let's see. So same general setup. The wiring is just differently across Padawan versus Shadow, but I literally took the same components. Like this is a 10-year-old Sabertooth 25. It has now been in 3 different droids.
Do you through-hole bolt your boards onto that?
Yeah, there are brass standoffs. I don't know if you can see brass standoffs. See the brass things?
Yeah.
They're there. Yeah, I'm using brass standoffs. I kind of marked the board and just drilled it out. I've done this a bunch of times, so it's just kind of like I kind of knew what I was doing. And I just kind of placed boards and took a Sharpie and said, yeah, you go there, you go there, you go there.
In America, that would be like a number 4 screw for most of it, 440 maybe. Whatever that is.
I have so many metric bolts.
That's like 2 millimeter maybe. Or
the standoffs are M3.
M3. Okay.
Yeah, 3 millimeters typically are the holes, Stephen.
Yep. I've across Michael's builds and other 3D printed things, I have so many M3 bolts and M4 bolts. I just have a giant stockpile. I know people like getting the very specific amounts, but I'm a person who's like, just buy the variety pack. You're going to have another project that uses them.
I think Michael's done more to introduce metric into America than anyone else.
Yeah, I mean,
I will agree with that.
My whole office is full of metric stuff. But
before Michael, M&Ms were just candy to me. I don't
know. So I do the bad thing. It hasn't run me wrong yet, but I fuse my Sabertooth and my Siren just for ease of power distribution. It's not recommended by Dimension Engineering, but I mitigate that by instead of having disconnects, I have switches. So my droid goes off, all the switches go off. So they're all on or all off. I've got a 12-volt rail, an 18-volt rail, because I power my droid with these Ryobi batteries, which are 18 volts. I used to use SLAs. They're bulky. I hate them. They're just annoying, and they're a pain in the butt to charge. I've got a ton of Ryobi batteries. They work fine. Josh, who lives around here, he uses a 40-volt battery, steps it down, which I'll get to in a minute.
When you charge your batteries, do you remove them from the robot before you charge them?
Yeah. I mean, it's a Ryobi battery, so I've just got Ryobi chargers sitting here in my office.
Well, what I was getting to is like charging a robot with lithium batteries is still kind of risky, or it can be.
Yeah, I realistically, even with a SLA, I never want to charge my batteries inside the Droid. I know there are plenty of safe ways to do it. It's just one of those things where I take some risks somewhere. That's one of the risks I don't feel like taking. And swapping out these guys is so easy. Like, it's just pop it in, pop it out.
Good call. Good call.
My 12-volt rail, I have not had issues yet. I actually use barrel connectors on everything, and it's made my life easier. And have so far no issues with brownouts, thankfully. I'm realistically not powering anything off of the Arduino. The Arduino is just sending signals, which does have a draw, but that's about it. It's just sending signals to the boards, the trigger, and then it'll be going out to a Maestro as well.
John, can I ask quickly, how do you step down from 18 to 12?
Getting there.
Thanks, sorry.
You're good. This big boy.
-6, Steve, -6.
Voltage converter.
Yep. They're like boat. Oh, that was weird. Who did that?
Oh, why are we viewing Michael Pajot's screen?
Oh, there we go. Back to normal. Sorry.
Step down. So they're like boat power converters, basically. I think they're technically waterproof, actually. This one can take 12. This one can take anywhere from 18 to 36, and it outputs at 12 volts, 30 amps max. But I use the little Wago connectors. I'm using like third-party ones, but they're well rated on Amazon. And then,
that's the hardest thing, is trying to pick something like that off the internet. Okay, cool. There's a voltage converter.
Is it right?
Is this a good one or is this a bad one? And what's a good brand and what's a bad brand?
I use EBL. I use EBL. If it's got a ton of reviews, a ton of stars, I buy.
I look at stars. Yeah, I look at.
So stars. I luck out. Being US based, I source almost everything from Amazon. Even my screws and nuts and bolts and stuff. I might pay a little bit more, but
you have to almost. No.
I just do. But this one is well rated. I've used it in multiple Droids now. And it's got a bunch of legit reviews. It's not one of those things where it's like fake reviews from like Chinese sellers and whatnot. I bought this. I've printed one as well. It's probably easier if you just print one or buy one, but it slots right over my thing, my battery. Good to go. I will have these labeled, but I've got 12 volt out, and then just a raw 18 volt. It'll be a bit tidier once it's actually mounted in the Droid.
I must say, those Anderson connectors are the way to go.
That is, so sorry, Steve, I hate XT60 and XT90 because of they take a lot to heat up to solder the connections. They're great once you solder them because they're super solid, because you had to get those things hot as hell. I love the Anderson connectors. The trick is with the Anderson, they're called Anderson power poles. I love them. They are expensive, but they are worth it.
That's standard in robot combat.
They are. So the standard ones can handle 30 amps, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so it's the smaller ones are 15. Standard ones, which I have, are 30, and then the beefy boys are 45. This thing doesn't put out more than 30 amp. Like, nothing in my Droid is pulling more. So Anderson power poles are my power connectors of choice. They are my disconnects. I had a bad run early on with, I let out the magic smoke too many times because I reversed my polarity sometimes. I had one where we were right before a hockey event, and I dropped my battery, which was fine. It was an SLA battery. It was big, beefy piece of crap. I dropped it, and one of the connectors came loose, and I was frustrated in a rush, and I wasn't paying attention. And I put the connector back on the battery and then plugged in the Droid, and then it just went poof, right before a major event. I was like, I just slumped. And it was a matter of, I didn't know if it was a $10 mistake because I blew my Arduino, or is it a $200 mistake because I blew my motor boards as well? And I wasn't going to know until I got back home. So that was a stressful event. It was just the Arduino, thankfully. I've never blown up any. Take that back. I've blown up an amplifier board before.
John.
Yes.
Sorry. While you're talking about the amp, I've obviously just recently wired mine up. I'm running it 12 volt off my fuse board. Is there? It's going to sound really stupid. Is there an indicator light on it when it's turned on?
Mine, yes.
Because
the Arduino.
I've sorry.
My Arduino is my indicator light. Cool.
There's not a specific light on the amplifier itself.
Oh yeah, the amplifier does. Yeah.
You can always add an LED with a resistor to any power source, and it's a damn good idea.
That's fine. I need because when I powered mine up, I didn't get a light on the
12 volts. There should be lights.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I'll have
good idea to have lights. Yep.
Light somewhere on the Arduino. Let me not touch light down there on the Arduino.
Yeah, if you leave something on overnight, it'll kill your battery, and it can kill it to the point where it may never be able to be recharged again. That's an important thing to do, is to know that you've shut everything off during the day, at the end of the day, at any time.
Yeah, the lithium batteries have phantom draw if you don't unplug them in these setups. So you definitely want to unplug your lithium batteries.
I'll have to
not to drop my stuff. There we go.
I'll have to have a bit of an investigation onto my amplifier because I don't think I've got power going to the amp, or I've got it in the wrong connector on the amplifier.
Are you using the Shure amplifier, or are you using something else?
Shure amplifier. I've gone into VCC and ground on the standby and ground side. But I'm now looking at it, and should I have gone next to where the barrel is?
Yeah, you need to go. It should be next to the barrel.
Looks to me like Nick is using a 40 volt system over there.
Yeah, I've
got some activity.
Josh is using a 40 volt as well. Josh Ward.
On mine here, I've gone VCC and ground at the top.
Yeah, that's right.
Those four.
Wait,
rather
hold on.
Rather than
no.
Yeah, but
you could do that.
Your board is spun 180 degrees round compared to John's, I think.
It is. Yeah, but my barrel connector is here. That's where my barrel.
You're flipped around. I have a feeling your soldering is off.
Well, this wasn't soldering. This was just on ferrule crimps, and
you likely have it not. Wait.
I'll go back and double check the documentation.
Do you have a multimeter or a voltmeter, or whatever you want to call them? The little thing where you can check the voltage and the
I do. I'll go back and
just do the tappy tap on your different connections and make sure there's actually
I will do. I meant to diagnose it earlier on, but I was just too excited to drive Chop around. I didn't have any sounds loaded, so I was like, I don't care about sound at the minute. I just want him driving. So.
Make him go, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a good idea to monitor all of your input voltages to all of your circuitry with a light, and call it an idiot light like you have in your car. That way you know you didn't leave something on and walked away.
Yep.
So when you get done, if there's 4 or 5 LEDs you had to add, you can add an LED to any voltage source with the proper resistor. And that's a very smart thing to do, because I have done that at robotic competitions where I left some switch on because I had 4 or 5 switches for things. And it's like the next day you come back, it's like, oh shit, I got to charge this battery for the next 2 hours before I can even use this thing.
Yeah, that can happen. I've got a whole, I take multiple batteries with me. The 4 amp hours get me about 4 hours of driving. And it's general rule for me is either all the switches are on or all the switches are off. So
yeah, up is on, down is off. I always do it that way for me.
Yeah, but like if I'm powering up everything, I'm powering up everything or powering off everything.
Yeah. It's kind of like you do airplanes, actually. Real airplanes. I
use a variety of connectors. I actually need to get some. So another tip for making these more secure is, so right now they're male to go into the Arduino. You can get right angle connectors to convert these to instead of the Arduino being female, the Arduino will be male with the right angles. Yep. And I find that the female connectors stick a little better. Plus they're at a right angle, so they're less likely to get like pulled as you're reaching around in the droid. The right angle, they're perpendicular to the droid.
Are they just the right angle header pins?
The right angle header pins, yeah. The male to male. You can get them and you just snap them off and add them in.
Oh, female to female, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 male ends that go female to female. I use the ferrule connectors. I think they're great. So the trick is with the Andersons, I think I was touching on this earlier, the Andersons are expensive. Part of the expense comes, at least initially, you need to get the specific Anderson power pole crimper. Other crimpers will not crimp them as well. And your connections will come loose. It's just a thing. Any of your connectors, like it's an expense, but is well worth investing in the right set of crimp tools. I've got a crimp tool for the Dupont. I've got a crimp tool for your standard, like for these guys. Connectors. Yeah, the old school crimp connectors. I've got the crimp tool for the ferrule connectors, and then the Andersons have their own thing as well.
To make a good connection for a crimp connector, do you solder it after?
I probably should, but I don't use them enough that I'm worried about it. They're not in places that get nudged.
I did that in all my combat stuff, robot combat stuff.
In something more robust, I would absolutely do it.
And I also would take tape or heat shrink and cover the wire and the connection or the terminal with the heat shrink, and then melt it on there just to provide strain relief.
Yeah.
That way you don't break the wire off right at the terminal where it always breaks off.
Yep. If anything, I might do it with these guys, with how I have the switches all wired back here. I use a bunch of printed, I got to add some more here. I use a bunch of printed wire control stuff. That's a great thing about Thingiverse. I custom made some mounts to go on the rails inside the Mark III. There are mating mounting posts here.
Can I just quickly ask you what the amperage rating is on those switches?
High enough. I got to look up the exact one. I was very careful when I was shopping on them.
Yeah, that's perhaps something, if you don't mind me just mentioning for the benefit of everyone else in the group. If you're going to use switches, like that, don't use cheap switches.
Double the current. Yeah, double the current needed.
Yeah, that's why I use on this board here. That's 100 amp switch.
Yep.
So yeah, don't get 16 amp switches because you'll probably melt them and bad things happen.
Always double your switch current rating just cause.
I paid a good bit of money to get the high capability switches in this form factor, because I could have got them for like $5 total, but I paid the premium.
A lot of times they'll be 5 amps or 3 amps or 15 amps. Get the 15 ampers.
Yeah,
so just go that way.
What else
solves a lot of weird. Well, you'll never kill the damn switch, and that's important.
Yep. Shadow does a daisy chaining for the serial, which is where the ferrule connectors actually worked out well. I was just kind of twisted the wires in and then put them on the ferrule. So it daisy chains serial in and out from the Siren to the Sabertooth. That's probably the biggest wiring difference, and it works totally fine. What else?
Are they communicating at different speeds then, John?
I believe so.
Yeah, I was just trying to think if they were both talking at the same baud rate, then how would it know one signal from the other? So
yeah,
that may be a throwback as to why that dome baud rate is set to 2400 in the default sketch.
It might. I did check though. The Shadow and 360 are forks of the original Padawan. I gotta look back through it, but yeah, they should be operating at different baud rates. Because I've never had issues with like moving both of those at the same time. With the single controller, you can't control the dome and the drive at the same time. Well, you kind of can, but it left and right, the X and O controls the dome, and this controls the drive.
And you can't push a button at the same time.
Correct. But if you want to do that, you can just fire up the second controller and then you get full functionality. I like being one-handed, and it's rare that I want to do both controls. What else on here? That's kind of the bulk of this setup. I will have this guy communicating with the Maestro to control his arms.
So, John, can you perhaps point people to where they can get hold of that code from?
Yes, I'll need to grab the link. There is a GitHub, but that is outdated. There's a GitLab link that is better. I'll grab it. Where is it? To counter what Steve said as well, I've dabbled a lot with modifying the shadow code to add some stuff, but I don't share it out. Or if I do, I share it on my personal with all the proper documentation, and within the code I have labeled what I have done. I stripped out the dome lighting controls because I don't pass any dome lighting signal up there, and I replaced that code, that functionality, with controls for what would have triggered like holo projectors doing automation or certain TCs sequences. Those button combinations trigger my Maestro combinations. Oops, not Shadows, 360 Shadow.
One thing I would like to see with people that provide their builds, and especially Arduino code, is that they would put remarks in the Arduino code that specified what they did, which wire goes where, or what motor controller am I talking to. You know, just throw a line or two in there instead of just putting all the code in there, and then, you know, as someone walking into it, it's like, what the hell are we doing?
That's the purpose of so it's a combination of things. It's there because you can typically tell by like what it's calling, like the different functions it's calling. I want to say Padawon's the same way. Like you can look within the function. The function is going to be named like this function controls this thing. Some of it comes from just some awareness of programming knowledge of like how programs are structured.
Right.
But yeah,
there is certainly in the Padawan code there is a lot of annotation.
There's a lot in Shadow too. It might not be super verbose, but it's there.
So when you need to adjust various figures for speed ramping, speed, and adjust certain parameters specific to your droid and build, there's certainly annotations to adjust this number to adjust the ramp, adjust this number to alter the dome speed. There's even a note that basically says if your dome spins the wrong way to what you expect, swap the wires over. So there's certainly plenty of little notes in there. It's just it does look daunting when you start reading it. But it is just spend the time and just have a look through, and a lot of the answers are answered in there. You were saying where you adjusted some of the functionality on it for like the head to add in animations and Maestro commands. That's something that I've got to look at doing certainly for Chopper.
Yep.
Chopper's lights and his dome are running off their own Arduino Nano, doing their own thing. So I've certainly at the moment I've got no control over those, but I've got a lot of Maestro animations with which to add in there. I think at last count, I think there's about 20. I know it's nothing compared to like an R2, but I think even Chopper's got 20 odd servos.
Yeah.
All the bells and whistles within him. So certainly adding Maestro commands into the Padawan code is something that I've got to I've got to look at doing. I think Steve touched on it. Is it best for me to watch them your videos for that? On how
if you're talking about me, no, I haven't put any videos out about Maestro. I've left that to Michael. He's done a very capable series.
You said that Michael had done some. Is that where I need to initially start looking?
Yeah. If Michael, if that's gets your blessing, then yeah, I would point people towards Michael's YouTube channel for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think isn't there about isn't it something like 4.5, 5 hours spread over four parts? I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, there were 4 sessions. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it was similar to this one. It was conversations really around what we do and how we do it, and just playing around. But it's worthwhile kind of investing time and just watching those. So Maestro's it's a brilliant system, but you need to understand how it actually works. It is, it's familiar to the Arduino users, but then it's very, very different than Arduino users, and you need to kind of understand the difference, really.
Yeah.
But
when I was working on, so I'm running Robbie on Padawan as well. I've gotten a lot of help from both Steve, thank you very much for all your videos, and Michael for the Padawan, for the Maestro stuff. It helped me when I went to look at, talking about the documentation in the Padawan sketch. I printed everything out because I can't look at a screen and say, okay, what's this? What does it refer to? And went through it with a highlighter. But everything there is slash. This does this.
Yep.
This does this. Yeah. Do this if you want A. Do this if you want B. It's all right there. It's amazing.
That's the way to write it. That's the way to. There's so much space left over from just the executable code where you can put text in to help the next person.
Yeah, I was just,
and that's been the hardest thing. And I've been doing Arduino since 2009, and it's like, God bless America. I got to go back and dissect somebody else's code just to figure out what the hell does this line do, because it wasn't defined easily to understand. And I've spent hundreds of hours trying to do that for all my projects.
Well, Stephen, there's no doubt you have an amazing amount of life experience, and I certainly do appreciate the fact that you're so willing to share all that you know. It certainly helps with the group. I would like to hear from some of the other people's life experience, and I would like to hear some other questions from others as well. But thank you for all you do share.
No problem, man.
Oh, and someone mentioned about comments in the code. That doesn't take up any space on the device. Like that all gets stripped out. So put as much as you want in the code when you're writing.
Speaking of space, Shadow by default does not fit on Uno. That is a key thing to know. Shadow does not fit on Uno. It is just slightly too big. I know that because I modified Shadow down to fit on an Uno to run DO version 1. That was an adventure.
From my perspective, I think one of the best approach for like configuration and this stuff is what Marlin do for the 3D printing software, where you have like one file, configuration H, and there is like basic configuration, which like almost everyone have to touch it. And then you have like second file, which is like advanced, when you know that only like people with advanced stuff go there. So they need to know. And you can, with these defines, you can easily switch on code, switch off code, change the values, and it's all on one place. So and of course you can fill it with the comments, and you should do this and this. And I think this is one of the best approaches which I've seen in, let's say, Arduino world, because you can easily just open one file if you want to start, and there is like, I don't know, maybe 20 stuff, but I can imagine that on Droid, it would be like how much, like 5 items there, which you will just set.
It's a lot.
But for a lot of Droids, you just need like basic stuff, and you have something that will work, and then you can tune it up in, let's say, different file when you know more what you are doing, which I think is good approach to this.
It is, but it is. The trick, the good thing is both of these systems are open source. So if somebody wants to go that route and rework the code to leverage that, they can. Both Padawan and Shadow are pretty straightforward in that the top section is a bunch of initializations with well-documented, this is what this variable is, this is what this variable is, like this changes this speed, this changes this speed. Would it be nice to have a separate file? Yes. Realistically, I think Matt's Kyber gets you that type of thing with the web interface and just setting your variables there. The R series logic lights do that now. They have a web server, and you can, like, on my phone, I connect to the web server and change my lights, which is really cool. The Arduino, maybe it's because I have dabbled with code most of my adult life. The Arduino code isn't that terrible. Like, I poked around, like, I know enough to be dangerous, and I poked around and be like, okay, this makes sense, and you kind of look at it and like, yeah, okay, no, this.
Well, frankly, I am do software development for like 30+ years, so for me it's no issue either. Yeah. But I know, but I see, especially with Arduinos, that a lot of people who never touch something like even code in, you know, on PC, and if you imagine the days before Arduino, you know, doing like these small microchips, it was like you have to have the programmer and you have to have a lot of stuff. And for everybody, it was like, wow, I will never touch this thing. And now, like almost anyone who never seen the line of code start uploading the software into Arduino and compile it and modifying. And then it's like, you know, then plenty of questions start
yeah, that's the great thing, though. Like, we've got a community, like, my going phrase whenever I talk to any about this stuff is we succeed on the collective, based on the collective knowledge of others. Like, these are, I mean, we're sitting here talking about control systems that are used by, I don't know, Shadow's probably used by at least hundreds, Padawan's probably 1,000 at this point, because it's likely the more common choice on the 3D builds. And like, yes, I have knowledge of code, but like, I didn't know any of this shit before I was doing it. Sorry, I did the cursing thing. But like, people, here's my thing. Like, people say, oh, I've never done electronics before. Neither had I. I built 3.5 full-size droids, multiple full-size droids. I've redone my electronics multiple times. You dive in and you figure it out, and you ask questions. Like, very, very many of us have never done this stuff before. And thankfully, we do have people in the community that have done this stuff before and either have laid the groundwork or provide great help. And those of us that didn't know what we were doing before and now kind of know what we're doing enough are more than willing to help as well. So but I think there's value in getting your hand dirty. It's part of why when people come up to me at cons and are like, oh, will you build me a droid if I pay you money? It's like, no, just on service level, no, but also there's so much value in, it's even why I don't like the idea of like pre-built drop-in boards, because we've got to be able to troubleshoot these things, and like having an understanding of the code, having an understanding of the components, even if you don't modify the code, there's so much value in understanding what these 60-pound, 70-pound rolling beasts do and what makes them go. There's just so much value in that, and so that you can tinker and then grow and build upon it.
That theory is something that I was dealing with. I was trying to build a Steadicam at one point, and I was trying to find shops that would build it for me. And I went to the local junior college, and I went to their shop class, and I said, "Can I do it?" And he goes, "Well, or can you do it for me?" He goes, "Well, I could do it for you, but for the price that I would charge you, it would be, you might as well just take the class and learn to do it yourself."
Yep.
You're going to end up spending the same amount of money, but you'll come out with a skill.
Yep. That's my feedback. I was like, no, I won't build it for you, but I will absolutely do everything I can to help you learn how to build it yourself. And I will get, like, we'll have build days. You can ping me and say, hey, what does this do? What does this do? Like, I switched to Shadow, and then like a half dozen local builders switched to Shadow, and we kind of helped each other along the way.
That's the way.
It is the way. It is. Definitely. Like, I luck out because I luck out because we have a decent local community. We've got a good crew here, and I'm not that far from a lot of other people, which is within the Mid-Atlantic region. But at the start, it was just me kind of working along as Michael was designing version 2. Like, I'm printing stuff as he releases it on Patreon. It's like, I'll figure this stuff out, whatever. Cheap. There's not, like, for the cheap specific stuff, there's no instructions. I just kind of printed out the stuff and was like, yeah, this works. And I'd occasionally ping Michael and be like, is it meant to go like this? And he's like, yeah. Like, okay, cool. And figure it out. But other people who are building cheap, I was like, if you have any questions, like, just ask me. I like, just because I figured it out myself doesn't mean you have to.
Can I ask a question?
Just because you figured it out doesn't mean I don't need your help.
But yeah, very simple question actually. What's the availability like of the actual hand controllers, and what's it known as if people wanted to search for one? Is it a nunchuck or something like that? I don't know what they're called.
It's colloquially called the nunchuck. It is technically the PlayStation Move navigation controller.
And are they still sort of fairly readily available?
You have to pay a little bit more for them. They're probably about the same price as you would be paying for the Xbox 360 setup at this point. But I regularly see them on like eBay for maybe $20.
I was gonna say, I got mine off eBay for like $15 a pop.
Yeah, they're not expensive. I have replaced batteries on 2 of them. I just got a battery kit off of Amazon. They were like $10 for 2 batteries. If anything, if you get one that's dead, it's almost certainly the battery, because these are from the PlayStation 3 era. Yes, they used them on the PlayStation 4, kind of, but not really. It was just the other one. The wand is the one that moved forward. But yeah, the PlayStation navigation.
Brilliant.
I'm probably going to regret saying this, but you can get them in CEX in the UK for about £6 each. I haven't bought one yet, so
I got a ton of mine. GameStop locally was selling them for $3 a pop. I bought 10, maybe. I gave several of them away to local builders. So it was like, hey, I walked into GameStop, they had 10. I was like, I'm going to buy all 10 of them because they're $3.
Yeah,
so,
grab them.
Yep.
Brilliant, John. Thank you. We're going to kind of circle back now to Trevor, hopefully, if Trevor's around. Trevor suggested this session, which I'm massively grateful, I think, as most of us are. And Trevor's done most of what he's done around the custom builds, actually, but his knowledge and experience in this kind of area is fantastic. So, Trevor, are you there, sir?
I'm here, yeah.
Fantastic. So, yeah, all we want to know is, how do you play Tetris on a dome? No, we don't. But
Tetris, huh?
But yeah, how do you start? How do you what's the options, and how do you cut through all of this this massive complexity and scariness?
So I guess where I wanted to start with, or why I kind of wanted to do this, was to sort of go over the why I ended up going basically a fully custom solution, which in some ways gave me a lot of freedoms and caused me a lot of hair pulling and time sink and such, but it did give me flexibility. So I guess when I was looking at a control system, stepping back a little bit, when you choose a control system, you got a few different blocks that you need to fill in. What features are you going to have? Are you going to have dome functions, lights, sound? Like every droid is going to have light, sound, movement, and power, right? So we got to power it by something. What are you going to power it with? What motors are you going to use for your drive system? And from there, you can kind of work back to what drive and control system you use. So we've talked a lot about Padawan and Shadows and those which are based on saber tooths and brushed motor systems, right? The scooter motors, basically. What if you want to go with a brushless system? Brushless systems are coming. They're going to replace the scooter motor systems eventually, I imagine. And there's lots of options out there for those. So what are you going to use for that? What voltage are you going to run your scooter motors at, or whatever your motor system is going to be at? And then from there, I think you kind of want to decide what controller do you want to have. So John mentioned he wanted the small controllers that he could hide. others like the Xbox 360 controllers, all viable options. And for me, when I was looking at it, I was trying to understand, how am I going to control this thing? How am I going to control all the various features and be able to puppeteer it? One of the things that sort of I was looking at the beginning was Arduino, and how do you control all the different dome functions and get those items to work. It didn't sort of plop out to me that it was very easy to do those extra functions without the LCD screen. Like I know there's the R2 touch system, I think, which works. You can activate all your sounds and everything that way. So none of those systems sort of gave me what I wanted. And actually, one of the things, it was a comment by Steve about the Padawan and a warning about don't do automated dome functions while driving at the same time, because you can end up with a runaway droid. And I was like, well, okay. And that sort of brought into light about these systems were software controlled. And if I was going to add features to the base system, well, it's quite possible that I could screw up the control system. And that bugged me a little bit because, you know, I wasn't 100% confident that I'd get all that to work. So in the end, I wanted an RC system for two reasons. One is I wanted flexibility and ease. So when I started this build, the first thing that I did was just basic movements and control and full RC system. I didn't have an Arduino controller in it at all. I just used a remote with a receiver and directly controlled the motors from the remote. And that's probably the simplest, easiest system that I've seen out there to get a system moving. I also didn't quite like the cost and availability of the Sabertooth. I'm kind of a cheapskate in some ways. Some people will know me say. And so I went with, you know, a more sort of ubiquitous RC control, ESCs and such. So you can, I run basically these cost me $15. And they're rated for 60 amps continuous, 320 amp piece. Plenty to run your droid. So I guess I'm not really a follow the leader kind of person. So that's where we ended up going on our own. So after a while, there were a few pieces that I didn't see out there that were kind of readily available. One was the charge ports and the data panels. So, you know, we created, this was our first generation controller. Basically what I started with was trying to get a controller built into the data panel so that I can have, oh, you guys can't see. Let's try and move things a little bit so we can see the droids. So a couple of things that I wanted, you know, the LED panel so I can see my voltages. I wanted the lights that aren't typically there. And
that's just plain pretty, Trevor. I'm sorry, I had to say it.
We definitely have a lot of blingy lights on this droid now. So I split my droid sort of architecture into two halves. One is control of the body and all of the functions with that. And for me, I have RC with, you know, the motor or the servos and such, and then my sound system is in my body. A lot of people have the sound system in the dome with the Arduino, and then they run the speakers down.
How many control channels do you need to control the basic functions of your robot?
Sorry, how many servos?
How many control channels do you need to control, you know, the functions of your robot?
So for me right now, I'm running probably 6 or 7 channels. Okay. I'm running S-Bus to my controller. So, but I'll get into that in a second. So I sort of split it into two halves, right? So and when you're looking at a control system, again, what functions do you want? So I have my dome functions sort of independent of my main functions. And all droids, because we can do, you know, the 360 rotate on our domes, you need a slip ring in there, right? And for me, it was like, okay, well, how do I get my data from my bottom to my top? And I chose an RS-485 bus for that. And if anybody wants to know about that, ask me and I can explain what it is. But anyways, it's an RS-485 link between the two, which is a serial-based link. And then I have a whole bunch of controllers up in my dome. And basically what I did was I created a little board here. And each individual function has its own little controller. And these nanos, they were cheap, so it was easy to make lots of these items. So, you know, what that gave me was flexibility to add functions as I want. So I have one for my lights, one for my logics, which gives me my Tetris because it's easy to add as separate. I've got one that's controlling my hollows, one that controls the, you know, your PSIs and different lighting patterns you can do on those. And one for the smoke system. So we can, you know, each of those items can be added as we go. As I add periscope or lifeform scanner, I can just add another module and they can all communicate together. So that was the main reason why I sort of went with this architecture. Now, in some ways, it's a little more costly because you end up with more modules up top. You could combine those modules together if you wanted, but those are how I got those features. Sound for me was, again, I'm a cheapskate. I didn't want to use the SparkFun controller, so I, you know, built on a DF Player Mini. This is unpopulated board. This is what my controller board looks like. It's running on a Teensy 4 to be specific, which is another sort of thing for me. I was sort of tired of the limitations and you know, horsepower of the Megas and such. It's really the, you know, 30-year-old technology with 8-bit processors and such. They work fine, nothing wrong with them. I went with a Teensy, which has a lot more horsepower and basically allows me to do whatever I want. Control all the various lights and sounds and such. The vocalizer, if you guys are aware of the vocalizer. Sorry, I can't see the chat, so.
It's still mostly talking about Shadow and,
okay.
and Sabertooths.
It's just a comment on Shadow to Teensy Venus with connecting two Bluetooth controllers.
Yeah, it's just weird about its dual Bluetooth connections.
What do you need two Bluetooth controllers for? Oh, because you have.
So that you can get, if you want to control Dome and at the same time, or get the extra sounds or controls.
Oh, so you run one controller directly to the Dome and one to the body?
No, just you get more because you only have one stick on one controller.
Right.
And the stick, just the way the controller is set up, you can't easily control both Dome and motor at the same exact time unless you have two controllers.
So you need two Bluetooth connections so you can have two controllers.
Yeah, and it gets a little weird with having the two Bluetooth.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be, but
the Teensy people themselves are not sure. Dan Krause and not Dan Krause, but Nightshade has been troubleshooting that with them over the past year or so, and just no real resolution on it. But it would be great to move more of the stuff to Teensy.
Yeah, they're a great processor. Like I said, they're a 600 megahertz processor compared to, you know, your 48. I think the Megas are a 48 megahertz processor with lots. So I think it's got 8 UARTs and such. So lots of peripherals can be controlled, hardware UARTs, functions like that. So I guess in summary, like, you know, I wanted a remote. So with this system, the drive motors are still controlled directly from my RC remote. So this is my RC remote. It's heavily modified. I added the third rotation on the stick and then the buttons here. And funny enough, I sort of was developing my system at the same time as Matt and the Kyber guys were going and developing their system. So there's a lot of similarities with it. Mine's obviously all coded by myself, and I would say somewhat harder to use than,
does
super
the
flexible.
does the keypad trigger like each switch a different, let's say, analog level output, so you get more? Yeah. Okay.
These all go into one channel, so each
right.
button.
You got 6 channels. You got to figure out how to make them do more.
Right. So this one channel gives me, even with this switch, so I have single presses for certain functions. Nice. If I do a single press there, he does that. If I hold it down, closes it, so that gives me 2 functions. If I hold this button, I press that, and I get the full crazy type thing to go. So it gives me a lot of additional functionality that I with a single set of buttons, basically. So that gives me all the options and control. Would I ever use a lot of that stuff? I don't know. When I've used them at cons, I tend to use like the same 5 buttons, right? And most of what you're doing, you go in, you wave to somebody, and away you go. That was the other part. So Maestros, everybody's talking about Maestros, wonderful. I'm doing all my servo control direct off my TNC, and allows me to do, customize all my sequences and run multiple sequences at once. So if I want to do 2 doors at once, I can do that. If I want to do 1, I can do 1 separate, or I can have them whatever. So I can trigger whatever I want at any point. That's the advantage this control system gave for me.
Nice. Nicely done.
I guess the difference with it is that you can either invest the time in learning and coding Tintzes to do all of that, or actually the Maestro does a lot of that for you. So it's the investment between coding against actually choosing specific technology and experience and knowledge as well.
Yeah, and for me it was because I mentioned earlier I'm cheap, and here Maestros are not cheap. They're not expensive, but they're not cheap. They're more than a single Teensy. So if I have to have multiple Maestros, then if I roll that all in myself, then it costs less money, right? But as I say, I'm cheap in spending money, but I've also had to spend many hours programming and trying to figure out how to do all that stuff without that. And that's where like Matt can kind of talk about the Kyber a bit in a little bit. Like the Kyber basically does what I did, but makes it into an easier user interface. So you can just set what you want to do, trigger your Maestros, and just use the Maestros to do your controls and such.
And I guess
for me, like things like light controls on here and on here, that system isn't right now directly supported by a Kyber. So you have to look at the features of each controller and what do you want for your droid, right?
I mean, I tend to see the systems as you've got RC, which is not analog, but effectively what you are is limited by the number of channels on RC.
Data.
So you've got 6 channels or 8 channels or 10 channels that give you 6 or 8 or 10 individual controls. And what you've done, Trevor, which the Kyber has also done, is taken 1 or 2 of those channels and gone, rather than it's a single control where it moves the dome or it moves the drive system, what it actually does is you kind of segment that. So if it's in the low, medium, or high range, it actually creates different animation results, which means you can actually then start to create switches against that. If we flick onto
the big key as well with RC that we're doing is using that S-Bus system. So what S-Bus is a serial out from the receiver that we can capture all of the data for all the channels onto one serial channel. And then we can do with it as we please, instead of having to parse each individual PWM line.
Is that much faster? Is that faster than the regular signal output for radio transmitters? Is it faster to do it through the S-Bus?
Yes, it is.
Same speed. Everything's being transmitted at the same amount of speed. It's just you're getting it in one
string,
block.
a long serial data string.
No, S-Bus is faster. I'm 100% sure because I check it for drones, for racing drones, and S-Bus is faster on standard PVM output, like servo output. You are limited like 50 updates per second normally.
So many milliseconds. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and S-Bus is faster. It using, I think it's like, there is like 10 millisecond between frames.
Wow.
Your servos are still being output though at 50 bits.
Well, it depends, of course. If in case that you are using standard servos, then of course the update limit is still same. But in case that you,
yeah, it's always the same. That's cool, man. I think you did a neat thing with your transmitter. That's a great way to expand it using the analog outputs and a switch to change the data depending on which switch you pushed. That's really increasing the power of a transmitter. That's a cool thing. Good job.
Thanks. So just quick look at the messiness of it inside of my dome, just to show the sorry guys. Gosh. So there's the individual sort of, as I said, it's a modular approach. So each of these modules here controls various functions. So there's the PSIs that I did, which look like that. They're a circular pattern. Again, a little bit different. So each one of these, each one is
power
on
the
a
dome
bus.
with do you power the dome with slip rings from the main
one slip
batteries
ring
in your robot?
So I have four wires that go over my slip ring. Well, I gang up the power wire so I get more power, but basically I have power, ground, and then my 2RS485 bus signal. And then each of these devices is on that same 485 bus. So you can see that I have these cables here, and then they just daisy chain from one device to the other. And that allows me to control each individual device on the same bus.
The 485, that's DMX, isn't it?
Well, DMX is a protocol. 485 is the physical layer. So yes, DMX uses
it's the transport. Yeah. Sorry, I only just sort of clicked in my buzzed brain. Thank you, Trevor.
Yeah. So 485 is basically, you've heard of RS-232, probably serial. Serial has one transmit line and one receive line. 485 is a differential bus. The advantage of 485 over 232 is it's what's called a multi-drop bus. So I can have all of these devices are on the same bus, but I can still talk back and forth to each one, right? So each one can talk back. Whereas on 232, it's a point-to-point system. You can have multiple listeners, but you can't have multiple talkers without killing the bus.
Sounds a lot like
Trevor, did you consider like something like I2C or something like this?
So I2C, the problem with I2C is, in my opinion, I2C isn't a great device for going over distances. Nope. And the reason is it's what's called an open drain communication system. And so with I2C, the way that you signal, you have a clock signal and you have your data signal. And then each device only pulls down the signal. And then you have to, basically you have pull-up resistors that allow the signal to come back up. And when you're going over large distances, across a slip ring, into a dome, etc., then there's a lot of noise and such that can enter into that, and it can make for a very unrobust system, we'll call it that. So I use I2C a lot onboard devices, wonderful. But going over distances and in a noisy environment, I've had a lot of issues with I2C, so I did not want to use that.
Oh, that was interesting. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's the reason why I'm asking. because I see the same problem and thinking like, okay, what I should do. And yeah, your bus definitely sounds better than I2C, or frankly, I even think about like switching standard serial and switching devices, or stuff like this, just to make it somehow work. And it's all these ideas was like kind of creepy. So I think your bus is definitely better. I will check it. That's good for
is an RS485 12-volt system instead of 5?
It's 12-volt compatible. It runs at 5 or 3.3. You just need the right converters to run it. It'll run at 3.5 or 5 volts.
If you run it at a higher voltage, would it be less noisy as far as because of the slip ring connection?
It gives you headroom, but no, it doesn't, because it's a differential system. It doesn't really help that much with 485. 485 can go kilometers. Like it's that kind of bus. People use it in industrial applications.
Right.
So it's a very good system that way. I think somebody mentioned, is it similar to CAN? Yeah, it's similar to CAN. CAN's a differential, it's just different protocol or different physical layer. And there's a lot more sort of, you need a special CAN controller to send CAN messages on your processor. Instead, RS485 is basically serial, but it's half duplex, so only one person can send at a time. So, but it's still serial, so it's very easy to implement on our micros because you just need a standard UART.
So it's send, wait, receive, send like it's not a.
So you can put like DMX is more of a. My understanding of DMX is sort of a one-to-many type architecture. So you would have your controller, right, that sends out to all these devices, right? But they typically don't necessarily talk back. So you need a protocol on top of your 45. So DMX is a protocol. Modbus is another protocol. So you can have a controller, or you have a master. You have a master and then multiple slaves or multi-masters, and your protocol sort of has to take care of the collision avoidance. Because what I could have is that if all of my devices in my dome started talking back, they would collide with everybody and no signals would get through. So I've orientated mine as sort of the one-to-many. I typically talk from my body to my dome. The dome doesn't typically talk back, but it could. But I would have to increase the protocol to do that, right? So that you don't talk over everybody. Same as we're on Zoom, only one person is supposed to talk at a time. And if everybody talks at the same time, then nobody hears anything, right?
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Thank you.
Brilliant.
People were talking about sirens. So I'm using, again, the same sort of similar system, standard RC items with PWM to control the dome motor. So there are other options to this. If you're having trouble getting saber-tooth, there are other options, is all I guess I'm going to say.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Trevor. Brilliant. Any questions for Trevor? If not, I think we're going to jump over to Matt to look at the Kyber system, which Trevor's mentioned quite a bit, actually. And I think it's quite an interesting evolution of where we're going from control systems on Astromech.
Thank you, Trevor.
No, thank you.
No
question?
question as such. I just wanted to say how impressed I am, and I love your droid.
Thank you.
Yeah. We all want to play Tetris in our droids, Trevor. I know just focus on that. I mean, I know you've got smoke coming out of it, and you've got a bunch of tools as well, but you just keep constantly kind of amazing and surprising the community and what you're actually doing. So brilliant.
Days were added yesterday, so that's kind of cool. That's the flexibility, right? I can just add in little gadgets. John was mentioning mag tags. Yeah, this is pretty kludgy, and I'll admit that. Yes, a mag tag would definitely make that way better.
Yeah, it's just like every other thing that is electronic related to our droids, supply chain issues right now. But it sounds like he's getting them every couple weeks or so.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Brilliant. And what we're going to do is wrap up this evening with Matt, I think, on Kyber. Matt, are you there?
Hey, yeah, I'm here.
Cool. Fantastic. So I'm going to, if I can get the damn thing to work, I will spotlight you, sir. There we go.
Nobody needs to see.
So, yeah, let's hear a little bit about Kyber controls.
So I don't know how to follow that up. I mean, Trevor did such a good job. He's way smarter than I am on electronics. But as he mentioned, I mean, we did kind of we were working on our things at the same time and didn't even know it. And then I think after we started chatting on here, we found out we had the same ideas, which was pretty cool. It showed it was something that definitely needed to be worked on. So what, I apologize, I don't have my droid here to show, but I can share screen. And we can show a little bit about what the Kyber does. So this is the Kyber. It's an all-in-one board that incorporates the sound and controls so that we can output to up to 2 Maestros currently. And now we're adding support in for Arduinos. So the boards will be going through an update. And it's one of the reasons I haven't been pushing a lot of stuff. It's so that we can get this update done, and then we can talk to Arduino. And Trevor had mentioned a little bit about, we're also looking at I2C, but then looking at some other different communications so that we can add peripherals, because what Trevor has done is really cool in that he can add all the new modules. And what kind of drove us to want to go to that side is adding more functionality in Wally and in like Mo, so that we can add a module for his eyes, or for like Wally, we can have the little module that goes in front, so that we can interact with all of those things. And then it can talk to the Kyber, or you can activate things through the Kyber. And what the Kyber does is, just like Trevor was saying, it takes, if we look at the transmitters, sorry, this is the manual, if you guys ever want to look through it. So we take the transmitter and we put the buttons on here. So we take one channel, we turn it into 15 channels. We do have, you can either put another switch here or a button there that you can then press that button, and then you can press these buttons and get an additional 15 functions or sounds or banks of sounds. That is, say if you wanted to put button 1 wanted to be the happy R2 sounds or mouse droid sounds, and then button 2 was sad R2 sounds. So you could go through all of those, or you can put just the one hits. We also, like what I was saying, tie into the Maestros, which then can tie your button to a particular function on the Maestro. So if you wanted to play R2 Scream with this button and open all the panels, then you're able to just tie those functions to this particular button here.
That's all in software, right? You do that.
It's all in the software. So we can go back up and look at, so what we've done to make, and Trevor kind of pointed this out, that his is very heavily program based. So he had to go through and do all the programming to be able to do all the stuff that he's doing. We've created a user interface that allows you to set your channels for the particular things that you're doing. You can also type in like just single, you can take a 3-position switch. Say if you didn't want to put that button box on there, you can take a 3-position switch and actually turn that into 2 buttons. So then that becomes button 1 and button 2 on your transmitter, and then you can tie those to different sounds. And you can do that for up to 6 buttons. So you can have up to 6 functions without having to add on or heavily modify the remote to add the 15 buttons. If you only need an additional 6 functions, then you can do it this way.
So you could rotate a clicky switch on the transmitter to trigger different functions depending on where you turn it?
That one you can. That one is just tied to the 6 buttons. So we didn't put the extra switch in there just because we didn't know if people would want to go to, if you're going to do that, it's better to go ahead and go with the 15 button board. because then you're not tying up 3 additional channels. If you went the way of doing button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and a switch, then you're tying up 4 channels or 4 pieces of your hardware. So 3 switches.
What I meant is like there's some transmitters that have a rotary switch, say 1 to 9 or 10.
There is, yeah. Yeah, we could look at doing that, but we chose not to for this particular function.
Okay, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. It's actually a good question. We do have, like Trevor was speaking about, with the button pad, you can have another toggle. So with the button pad and the toggle switch, you can have up to 30 functions. And then if you add these 6, you can have 36 functions on your transmitter.
Wow.
But what we're able to do, and this is another thing we'll talk about that we added in. But so this is the user interface for adding your buttons. So say if you had the button pad, you've got 1 through 15, you would add your sound. So if you wanted to play sound 1, you would just put sound 1 here. It's just going to play that one sound. If you wanted to do a bank of sounds, then you would put number 1 here, say number 15 here. It's going to page through all 15 of those sounds and then go back to number 1. So basically you create banks of sounds. If you wanted to put this tied, so R2 Scream would be 36, you put a 36 here. Then you would say Maestro for the body would be function 1, Maestro for the head would be function 1. And then when you hit that button 1, it would activate the sound and activate Maestro 1 and Maestro 2. So that gives you your functionality of being able to set this. And you could also set delays here so that if Maestro 1 wasn't lining up exactly with Maestro 2, then you could put a little delay here and a little delay to the sound so that you can match things up a lot easier. Instead of having to go back in and try to match it up in the Maestro, you could try to match it up here a little bit easier. Go ahead. Is there a question?
Nothing.
Okay, and then we've also added the ability to pass the RC channels through the Maestros. So say if you had RC channel 1, you enable it, you tell it on the controller which one is RC channel 1, and then when you move that, if it's on a joystick, so what I've done for like the pit droid head is the servos were too jerky and too movie, or don't have the motion smoothing. So with the Maestros, there's acceleration, deceleration, and you can also adjust the speed. So if you put this on stick 1 and on Maestro 1, say it's channel 6, now you can use that Maestro to control the acceleration, deceleration of that servo. So now you can get a lot smoother motion in your servos. And then you can still add these into be able to control them with the Maestro programming also. So it's wiring up is a pretty simple system. It can be wired into any existing droid or into new droids. Let's see, where's that at? We've got wiring guides. If you go down to the simplest,
good,
which is going to be here, you can also say if you wanted to put this in like a 39.1, it's kind of expensive to do that with, but it does have, the DF player does have like a 2-watt amplifier that you can run your speaker out on. So you could run this out and have your speaker directly off the Kyber system if you wanted to, just to have a smaller droid do some sounds.
Hey, Matt, there's a question in the chat. Stephen, give me a chance, please.
Sorry,
Matt, there's a question in the chat about which remote controls are compatible, what the minimum requirements are, and that's a foundational thing.
Yeah, good question. So if we go down and look at what I've actually tested, any of the Far Sky stuff, down to like the QX7 or the X7 is one of my favorites just because it's cheap. You don't need that many channels. It has 7 channels, functions well for what we're doing. You can go up to like, I think this is the X10 We've messed a little bit with the X20, which are really expensive, but you can also, we've tested with the Spectrum radios. The thing about Spectrum is it doesn't support S-Bus, and that's where, like Trevor's is doing, is running off S-Bus. Spectrum doesn't fully support S-Bus, but there is a brand RC receiver out there by Orange RX that actually allows you to use the Spectrum radios. And I did test it. It did work with it. It's a little bit more complex because it actually does take setting up the RX receiver, and their instructions aren't the best. I guess I could do a video on actually doing that, would make it a little bit easier.
So generally speaking, if something supports S-Bus, that would probably be compatible?
S-Bus, yeah. So some of the FlySky stuff, I've seen people using some of those that you can use, and they haven't had an issue with them, so they are working. I haven't personally tested one. I've just tested the Spectrum. Oh, and we did test the, what's the other big radio that's out there?
Futaba.
Futaba. You are able to use those as long as you use the S-Bus receivers. So we did test those.
That was a question I might ask, is what is a good RC transmitter nowadays? Because there's been a bunch. There's been a lot of changes. I mean, I started out, I used Futaba, I used High Tech, I've used JR, and then there's a whole bunch more that have came along, especially when it went to 2.4 gigahertz.
Right.
What's a good transmitter and receiver package to use with modern technology?
I mean, the one, I'll go back to the X7. It's relatively inexpensive. I think they're like $119. The receiver is usually around $39 or $40, depending on which ones you buy. But it's personal preference, I guess, on what you've used before and what you're experienced with. The thing about the newer transmitters, like any of the FlySky stuff, or FarSky stuff, sorry, not FlySky, FarSky or Farsky, or however you pronounce it, is that they run OpenTX. And that's different than like Spectrum, because the OpenTX allows you the functionality of changing all your switches around really easy, doing all your mixing, which you can do with the Spectrums and stuff too. But with these, I've saw that, and maybe it's just my experience level with these, is that I can set these up a lot easier. I seem to have struggled with setting the Spectrums up. And some of the Spectrums only allow you to put certain things on certain channels, where with like this system, you can set this system to do, you can set it all the way down to using, I think Trevor pointed this out, of using your trim pots to be able to manipulate things through their software, which is really cool.
So what system are you recommending?
I would recommend these, the X7s. It's what I use on all my droids, except for BB-8, I use the X10, just because I needed to add the twist pots in.
Thank you.
Matt, out of interest, does the 15 button pad cover up the neck loop strap thing?
This one covers up your two trim sticks, and then covers up the power, and then also part of the speaker right there. And this is something that you could adjust or build. I've seen people actually take these and put the box up here. So several people have built new files to do different things with. And there's also, another board that we offer, let's see if I've got it pictured. Instead of the button pad, you can buy this other board that you can put inside your transmitter. So then you can wire buttons wherever you want. So this one I took and wired the buttons on the back side of the transmitter. And this one I've just got 8, and then I think I've got 2 more here, 1 there, 2 there, and 1 there. So now the buttons are just all over the place, and then you can have all of the top of your remote free.
Wow.
I've seen several different people make different configurations where, depending on where your fingers can reach, some people land their fingers naturally in this zone. So they put their buttons in here. Some people have easy reach up here. So I've seen them put more buttons around this zone, just wherever you think you can get them inside the transmitter to make them fit and not, get in the way of closing your transmitter up. And like cool. This one.
Oh, I like that. I like this.
See that I put 6 buttons here. This is wiring up just that 6 button feature. So I've got the 15 buttons here with a toggle switch that gives me the other 15 buttons. And then I wired in the others. So this has 36 additional functions on this transmitter.
Wow.
That you can do from just these buttons and these buttons here. All that, everything else is still being controlled through the standard channel receiver. So the drive system and the dome span don't go through the Kyber. They go directly into the receiver directly to the peripherals, so that I don't have any chance of losing that signal or cross-talking across that signal to end up,
But still, channel 3 and channel 4 on the left-hand side are still functional?
Right here, yes. This would.
Yep.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, this would be my channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, if like for Wally.
Okay.
I drive on the left and Puppeteer head on the right, which I know is odd from a lot of people, but you can set that up however. But
so do you add a spring for the centering your left stick then, Matt? Your throttle, what would typically
for the drive system? I don't have springs. For the head mechanism, I have springs up and down
on the right hand side, yeah,
but not left and right. And everything, because it's proportional to Wally's head, is used. Well, I do have springs in it too, because there's proportional control here instead of being
standard. That's standard steering. The other channel is for southpaws, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can put springs in them too.
You can, yeah.
For people who are saying they like the form factor of the Xbox 360 controllers, there are controllers out there that have that same, like RC controllers that have that same form factor.
There are, and some of those are, Far Sky has several of those. And actually, I think John has been testing one of those, John Boschford.
I have one here.
They just have less features usually, but
yeah, they do. As long as you have one on it that has a trim pot on there, then you can wire in the additional buttons. Or like John was doing, he just took a couple of the different channels and he's just using the 3 positions and he's just using the button matrix. So just the six functions instead of having all 30 on there.
It's nice. I like that. I like that.
Matt, could you sort of give us an indication of how much expertise or how much knowledge or how much skill perhaps is involved in adding things like the buttons and button tabs?
To me, it's simple to do because I've done it so many times. But say, like if you were going to do the X7 and you're just going to add this on, this has 3 wires to it. And then you would open it up, take off the back, and then you would find the potentiometer channel, let's say one of these. Another function I didn't mention on this is this also has volume control. So you can't put that on another twist pot, so you can adjust your volume real time from your transmitter. So if it's too loud at the con, which never happens, but if you're in a private setting or something, then you could cut that down here instead of having to go into your Droid to adjust your volume. So the volume is on the transmitter. Wow. But then to simplify, to wire it up, you would just say use this switch, you would cut its 3 wires, tie in these 3 wires, and then that's it for wiring up, for making the mod to your remote. If you just use this one. If you're going to add these in, it's a little more complex in that you take 1 3-position switch out, you put in 2 buttons, and then you wire those up from those 3 existing wires. The ground being the common between the 2 buttons, and then there's usually a white and a blue or white and a red. And then you just put the red and the white on here with the grounds in the middle as common. But what I'm going to do, and another thing that's had me kind of screwed up is I've been trying to finish some school, and the last 2 classes I've had have just took my entire free time up. So those are done. I'm finishing those this week. So I'm going to start doing some more things on how to do the Kyber. And I think one of the things that hurts the Kyber is it's new. That people still want more people to see. They want to see more droids out there using it, or they want more of a helper user interface kind of, or what do you call it? Discussion board where people can help solve problems and things like that. So I think that's one of the bigger things, like all of these other controllers have, is there's a huge basis out there because they've been out there so long. So what I want to try to do is get more information out there initially by doing a really simple video of this is how you mod this. This is how you install this thing. And try to get all of those out there, and then go through the one thing I didn't take into account was people really don't know how to use their RC transmitters and how to program the channels, or that you need to mix the channels, that, you know, then you can see the outputs and what you might be looking for on a particular remote. I'll start with the X7 because it's the one I use the most, and then move to some others, or if someone else wants to do a video on modding, you know, a Futaba or something like that, then, you know, maybe people can start doing that, and we can build a bigger user interface to get it out there, because I think the Kyber offers a lot of stuff and a lot of simplicity for everyone to be able to do things simpler and to not have to know programming. That, you know, I really want to get it out there. And we're also going to look at the price is running right now around, I think it's $250 for the Kyber board itself, and then around $50 for this board and $25 for the other board. We're going to work with Trevor on getting these things SMD'd and try to get the price down. And I think we're going to hopefully get it down to under $200 for the board, which will help hopefully help people get, you know, that out there. And then we're going to look at starting to do pick a charity or something that we can start donating a part of the Kyber system to, so that maybe I know not everybody likes to donate to different places, but maybe we can pick someone as a group, and then this system can start to help benefiting other people out there. It won't be that much. Probably, I mean, if we can donate $5 per Kyber, then we're helping someone out, even if it goes to a foundation like Page or something to even figure out how to help, you know, builders that have issue, or look at somebody that is having an issue, and then we pick that for that year or something. But I'm hoping to sell, if we sell 100 of these, that would be $500 to somebody.
Matt, at conventions and bits and pieces like that, how do you find being fairly obvious with this sort of system? Because obviously the Padawan 360 is concealable to a certain degree.
It is.
The main reason for John obviously going to Shadow is the single controller that he can hide very, very effectively. So that's obviously even less obvious. How's it been received by people? Has it spoiled the magic, as it were? Or?
No, not if you want the magic spoiled, you're going to be looking for the guy holding the transmitter. There is that group of people that do, but 90% of the time, or more even, if you're standing there in a crowd of people, you're standing back, and this is going even to like what the Disney droids are doing. And it's another system we're working on, which we can talk about a little bit later. But even at like Disney, with the droids, they're using something really similar, but they've got another joystick in their hand and then another controller. You put this in the bag. But you don't see it. But say, like we were at LA Comic-Con, and this happened 5 or 6 times, and Tina can contest to this. She's standing there with me, and I'm sitting there controlling the droid, and there's a guy talking to Tina. He's like, "Who's controlling that droid?" And I'm standing there right beside her within earshot of this guy, and she's like, "I don't know who's controlling the droid." And you're just people are so looking to that they don't see it. Now the guy across the other side that's looking at the back of the droid that sees me interacting, they're gonna know that I'm there. But most people, they see the droid, they walk up, he's talking, and they'll even come up to you after you're done. It's like, R2 was talking to me, it was all about me. And another proponent of this is that don't stay hidden. If you, to me, I like to talk to people. And I love interacting with everyone's that's there. And you can inspire someone. It's not about the droid all of a sudden. It becomes about engineering or about building a droid, or what does it take to build one? And then you can start a whole nother conversation with someone that may have not ever approached you, or couldn't have never approached you if you were standing there and behind, not being seen. And now you've inspired someone else to go out and build a droid. And so now they're going to go out and try to generate the smiles that we do. So in a way, I'm a proponent of being seen with the transmitter. Now, take that into context, because, I mean, we do things where I have to hide the remotes. I mean, everything. And I've got another system just like they use that goes in a bag. I've got a wired transmitter that comes around through my sleeve. And then I've got the dome control in my hand. And then I've got sounds and stuff on it too. And then I've also got the sounds in the bag. So now instead of having both my hands in a bag, I've got one free, and I'm just, the other one, I've just got my bag around my side. And the bag that I've got has a hole in the back, so I can stick my hand down the back side. So it just looks like a satchel on my side. So there are things you can do to hide it, and you do want to do that. Wally's more complex, and when we're at those events, we do have to have my hands in one bag because he just takes so much to control. But you can keep things hidden like that too. And there are ways of doing it that are inconspicuous. And some of the guys have gotten really good at actually driving these in behind their back. Victor Franco is one to mention. He can have the transmitter in behind his back and just do everything with R2.
Joe Font. Joe Font.
And Joe Font. So there's several people that have perfected that method. So they'll just stand in a crowd just with their arms slouched, with the controller down on their backside and just doing everything they can from there. And that, keeps the illusion alive. But I would say you're not going to be worried about it 90% of the time. And the events that you do have to have it hidden, then find a creative way to hide it. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
I was thinking of embellishing the controller even and making it look like a control panel from Millennium Falcon or something, add more to it. Just look like
that was my brain too. Yeah.
And actually, David Ferreira's got a really cool one. He's got, for his BB-8, he's got a little, it's a nice thing that straps to you, and it's a tray. And you've got a thing there where you can rest your hands on it and do the controls. So that makes it more ergonomic, especially when you're at a con all day. And BB-8's really hard because he actually takes, you have to constantly be, especially with the twist sticks, you want that weight of the remote off of your hand so that you have more freedom with the twist sticks.
I definitely use a neck strap on mine.
Yeah. Oh, I always definitely do that. So any other questions? It's a lot to cover with this thing. There's a lot more that can happen as far as wiring up, but I want to say, if anyone, with it being new, I have people reach out to me every day on this, asking questions on what they need to do next, or I'll sit down with them and help them get their transmitter set up. So that's what makes me want to go through and do the videos. Now that I have 10 or 15 people that have asked the same question, I know I need to make a video for to help people move forward with this system.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
And again, if you, sorry, where do people get to see information about the Kyber? Where's the best place to see?
So the Kyber currently is only available through Facebook, through the Kyber page.
Yeah.
So just look up Kyber Control Systems on Facebook, and then you'll find it there. You can also buy them through the R2 Builders group, so astromech.com or .net. So there's a page on there that points you to buying them through Facebook. Currently, I'm going to look at setting them up through Etsy once we get the new system, but again, that adds cost. So we're trying to keep the cost down. But now that PayPal is making you pay taxes on anything anyways, it's going to be, might as well push it through there.
No, brilliant.
And then an instructable or a YouTube video would be nice.
there's several out there, but I want to go through and get more. It's just, I try to think it's easy in my head, but it's because I've done it 100 times. And then someone coming in new to a transmitter needs more information. So that's just me taking the time to actually sit down and get that information out there. So,
and also, if anybody has any ideas on videos that they want to see, maybe they need instructions on something, just reach out to Matt or myself and we can probably push that out.
Yep.
Brilliant.
People were talking about earlier about, code and documenting your code and making instructions. That stuff's hard to make these instructions, these videos. So
it is.
It's why I haven't released a lot of stuff for my things, because I'm not good at documenting and telling people how to use it, and the support nightmare potential is high.
Well, technical writing is an entirely different career path from development and programming and so on. I mean, it's a completely different skill set.
I kind of do that at work, and I do so much of it at work. I don't want to come home and do it.
Yeah, I hear you.
I don't want to do it ever.
Yeah,
tech support is hard.
If anybody wants to write instructions and do videos, I'm sure Matt would love it.
Yeah.
We'd all love it. Anybody who wants to do instructions, just reach out to the group. You'll be
reach out to Michael also.
I need instruction writers.
So it's a lot of work to put a manual together.
And to keep it accurate. Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard.
Well, and when the designer writes the manual is typically crap, because
it is right.
They know how to do it.
You understand it up here.
Yeah,
exactly.
You have to write it. You have to write
different
it
skill set
for a sixth grader. I mean, a beginner. Always rewrite any of your tech stuff for someone who knows nothing. Don't assume that they know anything.
You send that manual over to an English major.
No. Technical documents are not written in proper English. That is
my grammar sucks.
It never will be. I mean, if you make it so the liberal arts major can figure out how to do it, then
this is true.
I think I just heard Tina volunteering to write all of our documents.
But a lot of the times you can't write a fully, because the guy needs to turn a bolt. That's all it needs to say. It doesn't say, pick this up, do that, do that. Of course, ours do. Ours say everything.
Honestly, you guys, if anybody puts together a manual or something, I have no problem proofreading it. Just send it to me. I will volunteer and help.
I'm afraid of the response.
We'll write the
well done.
This, Tina, and you can fill in the gaps.
One of my editors told me for several magazines, stop writing things redneck, Steve. my tech was correct, but it's like you're writing it too redneck, Steve.
That's funny. Well, good. Well, thank you guys. I think everybody did a phenomenal job today. I mean, there's like everyone said, there's not one right system. You're going to pick what's comfortable for you. If there are people around you, like John was talking earlier, that's what they're using, and you have 5 or 6 people around you that can help you build those things, then that's a good way to go. So just, do what's comfortable for you and what your skill set allows you to do. And then if you don't have anything you're comfortable with, reach out to the people that are doing it so that we can help you along.
If someone asks you a question, answer it nice.
Always. And if it's the same question, answer it the same exact way. Don't.
Even 20 years later,
there is a new user every time. And we can't take that away from anybody, no matter how famous we get, no matter how many questions we get. If it's the same time, that guy's question is new to him the first time.
That's right. Exactly. 100%.
So take the time to help new builders. We're getting old. We're not going to be able to tote these things forever. So we've got to help new people.
Yoda said, pass on what you have learned.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Okay. Brilliant. I think we're virtually, we are at the end now of the entire session. And thanks, Matt, for wrapping that up. And I mean, I think the Kyber system now is pretty much just at the start of its life, and what it's going to end up, hopefully, the influence it's have. My observations is, we kind of hang on to stuff that works. So we hang on to the Padawan, we hang on to the Shadow, even though this technology is probably getting on for 6 to 8 years old now. And so it does need new stuff, you know, it kind of needs solutions, and it needs new ideas coming forward.
Same thing with motor controllers, same thing with things. We've all used the same things, and there's so much new technology that we can feed off from. Even a new builder may come in with something brand new. So
I learn things every time I come here, and I've been doing this stuff for 24 years in robotic combat. So I appreciate this. I appreciate this forum and all the people here. And by the way, Michael, if you just had COVID, so have I and my mom and my dad, and I hope you feel better.
Yeah, no, I'm cool. I'm a lot better than my wife is. It hit her quite hard. She's recovering now. She's feeling a lot better.
Mesolix or something, the thing that stops the mucus in your lungs is probably your best bet to survive, and then you got to live through it. That's what they gave to my dad.
We're fortunate in the UK. We've all been triple jabbed, so it's kind of at the kind of heavy flu.
We've all been triple jabbed, and he still got it. And so did I.
You just got a natural booster. That's all, Mike.
Yeah. So anyway, fingers crossed, everything will be okay. But I appreciate. I'm going to stop recording now